Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 1. Sunday, January 26, 1997. The night began at El Farallon, a popular nightclub in Linwood, California. El Farallon was where you went to hang out with your friends and get lost in the music, forgetting everything else for just a few hours. It was where I met Juan Lopez, my second husband, after locking eyes with him across the dance floor. Most important, it's where many regional Mexican singers launched their careers. And it was where I decided to shoot my first video for my song La Chacalosa. My father had done business with the owner of Farallon, Emilio Franco. Franco said we could shoot the video before the doors opened at 9 p.m. At the time, my dad, known to many as Don Pedro Rivera, was one of the biggest producers of regional Mexican music. He had always been my biggest supporter, and especially in those early days when I was struggling to break out. He had plans to buy commercial airtime for this video to promote La Chacalosa. I wasn't making much money with my music. It was difficult to get my songs on the radio because I refused to fit into the mold of the typical Latina singer. I should have been younger, thinner, softer, quieter, and dumber. In the Latino community, female singers were supposed to be beautiful and super skinny, and their music supposed to be silly. Latina singers were meant to be looked at, but not really heard. I wasn't the eye candy. I was considered overweight, and I was considered not to have vocal talent. And I was singing strong, ballsy corridos. I probably intimidated the men. No other women were singing corridos. It was like the women rapping. Women weren't thought to be tough enough or real enough to be singing about greedy world of drug dealers. The people in the industry tried to make a change. If you want to make it in this genre, they said, you have to do this or that. A lot of women had to do sexual favors to get played on the radio. Fuck that. I wouldn't do it. I wanted to make it based on my talent or not at all. At the time we shot the video for La Chacalosa, I was working as a realtor to support my 3 children and myself. Music was secondary. Juan Lopez, the man that I later married, was serving a 7-month prison sentence after being charged with smuggling immigrants. He was set to be released in 3 weeks. Because I didn't want to be alone, my sister Rosie and her friend Gladys came with me when I would go out at night for a music gig. On this night, they sat on a nearly empty club watching me do several takes of a song. I thought we would be done by 9, but by the time we finished taping at around 9:30, a few customers had started to trickle down the bar area. Before we left, I went into the ladies' room, and as I exited the restroom, a man grabbed my right arm to make sure he had my attention. "Aren't you El Cinco's lady?" he said. El Cinco was Juan Lopez's nickname. I distinctively remember looking into this man's green eyes as he tugged roughly at my arm. He was making me upset, and he knew it. "Leave me the fuck alone," I told him as I broke away, wondering why he knew Juan and why he cared that I was Juan's lady. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 2. I picked up my things and walked out of the club with Rosie and Gladys. I was in a bit of a rush because they were both still in high school and this was a school night, and I wanted to get them home as quickly as possible so we wouldn't get in any trouble and they would be allowed to hang out with me whenever they wanted. I was never one to have many friends, especially since Juan scared many of them away with his temper and his rude behavior. Now that he was incarcerated, I was a loner. Hanging out with the girls was fun and helped me keep busy until his release. First, I dropped off Gladys at her house in Walnut Avenue in North Long Beach. Then I dropped off Rosie at her parents' house on Ellis Street, just a few blocks away. It was only 10:30, so we were in the clear. Once I made sure that Rosie was in her house, I turned the music and began to drive back home. I was living in a beautiful gangsterific Compton. Being a realtor, I had bought a house there as an investment and decided to live in it for a while. It wasn't the best neighborhood, but I was happy to have a place to call my own. I couldn't wait to get in my bed that night. I was singing along to my favorite CD, Quince Éxitos by Marisela, as I drove down 91 Freeway West. As I exited right into Central Avenue, I noticed a car behind me flashing its high beams. It got closer and closer as I slowed down to see if I knew who it was. I didn't recognize the small white sports car. I couldn't see who was driving. The driver flashed its high beams again. What the fuck? Was I driving too slow? Did I forget to turn my signal? Suddenly, the car sped up alongside my green Ford Explorer, purposely trying to sideswipe me. That's when I realized not just 1 but 3 men were in the car, and I started to get scared. I sped up, hoping that they were just messing around with me. They weren't. They would drive behind me and sped up again, and then run me off the road and into the parked cars on Central Avenue. Shit, what the hell am I going to do? I said to myself. I was approaching my house on Keene Avenue, and I didn't want these men to know where I lived. I was living alone with my 3 young children. Our house had just been broken into 2 months earlier, and everything had been stolen. That's how the neighbors had found out that my husband was locked up and wasn't there to protect us. All this was running through my mind, and as I kept driving the block, hoping these guys would magically disappear. My whole body was shaking. Finally, I stopped close to my house, though not in front of it. Maybe they'll just leave, I kept saying to myself. How foolish. Their car stopped behind me, and all I could see the men were ready to step out. I didn't know what to do, and fear took over. I decided that I would make a run for it. I would run as fast as I could, the way my brothers had taught me when we played baseball as kids. I opened the car door and started sprinting my high heels, screaming at the top of my lungs. I did not look back, and I could hear the sound of their boots running after me. I ran, I screamed louder. I cried. I prayed that someone would hear me. If they did, they never came to my rescue. The bootsteps were gaining on me. My heels were slowing me down. Suddenly, I felt two pairs of strong arms grab me. I had been caught. I tried to fight back. I kicked and screamed. I wasn't going out easy. I was the gangsta bitch from Long Beach, the Rivera rebel who never lost a fight. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 3. I was outnumbered. One man stayed in the car. One covered my mouth with his huge hand. One dragged me by the hair and pulled at my arms until I was thrown in the backseat of the car. That's when I saw those green eyes again, the prominent chin, the man from the club. He assaulted me in the backseat of the vehicle. Over and over, he repeated the words I had said to him in the club. Leave me the fuck alone. Leave me the fuck alone. He mocked me as he assaulted me. As the tears streamed down my face, I decided not to fight back anymore. All I could think about was my kids. I was so afraid that I was going to be killed and they would be left without a mother. Maybe the men would let me live if I behaved. I felt that I was losing myself. All I could feel was the strength of seeping out of my body and mind. I was afraid that they were going to take turns on me, but when the man was finished, he told his friend, "Throw this bitch out of my car." I silently thanked God as I was slamming to the sidewalk, realizing that it was finally over, but the damage was done. I sat on the curb numb. I couldn't cry. I was just relieved to be alive. I vowed that I would never tell anyone of my shame. They say that when you keep a secret, it eats you up inside, but I felt that it was better that way. I wanted to appear strong in front of my children and my family. I didn't want anybody to know, and I wanted to maintain my persona as Jenni, the Rivera rebel who had never lost a fight. But deep down inside, I knew I had lost a piece of myself and I would never recover. My soul had been shattered, but to the outside world, I just did as I had been taught since I was a little girl. I kept my head up and continued forward. After all, it is the Rivera way. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 4. I was born on July 2nd, 1969 in UCLA Hospital, the first Rivera to be born on U.S. soil. The hospital was new and they had a program through which it only cost $84 to have a baby. Thank God, since my parents did not have health insurance. When I was growing up, my father would always say I was the cheapest baby. They named me Dolores after my maternal grandmother. My middle name was going to be Juana after my paternal grandmother. Dolores Juana. Can you imagine? Ugliest name ever! My mother had a good sense to say, we can't do this to her. Isn't there an English version of Juana we can use? Or what about using your cousin's name, Jenni? My father caved and I was Christian Dolores Jenni. Still not exactly the most beautiful name you've ever heard. I never let my parents off the hook for that one. I was a baby. How did you give a child a grown woman's name, I would say. I never went by Dolores, though if my brothers and sister wanted to piss me off, that's what they would call me or Lola. As a child, I was Jenni or Che. I was fair-skinned, red-headed baby. My parents said that when they brought me home, my older brothers, who were 5 and 3, instantly fell in love with me. Billy and Gus were instructed to protect me and care for me. I was the queen of the house, La Reina de Long Beach. As my father said, if anything ever happened to me, it was on them. So they treated me as if I was another little boy. Since they had to protect me, they always wanted to make sure I was tough enough to defend myself. Financially, things were not good during those few years. My parents moved us from Culver City to Carson to Wilmington, then to Long Beach. We were constantly getting evicted. My mother told my father that she would not have another baby until she had a house of her own. That's when they bought the small 2-bedroom on Gale Avenue near Hill Street on Long Beach's west side. The area was known for its gang warfare, but it was the first place where the Riveras finally had a plot on the American land to call their own. It was home. I was almost 2 when we moved into that house, and my mother immediately became pregnant with her 4th child. Soon after she found out that she was pregnant, she got the news that her father was dying in Mexico. She couldn't go back to see him because there was no money, and because if she crossed over the border again, she might not have been able to come back. One of the dilemmas of pursuing the American dream is that you sacrifice being able to ever see friends and family you left behind. Back then, I never realized how hard it must have been for my mother to be living in this new country, barely getting by financially, with 3 young children and another on the way. But how could I have ever known? My mother never let on anything was wrong. She kept her chin up and acted as if everything were just fine. And so we did too. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 5. When I was in 1st grade, Arturo, the boy I had a crush on, asked me if it was okay to touch my dress. His daddy had told him that's why girls wear dresses and skirts. That was the end of my crush on that little punk, and the last time I wore a dress to school. For years, my mother would fuss over my tomboy clothes, but I never told her why I refused to wear girly skirts and dresses. I did tell my older brothers, Piliangas, about Arturo's request. They warned me that they didn't want to hear from their friends that their sister was being felt up by the boys in school. If we're going to hear rumors, it better be that you sock them and kick them in the face. They warned me, and don't you dare come home crying either. I remember their words one afternoon when I was walking home from school with my mom and Poopy. I was 9 and my little brother was 7. My mother was holding Poopy's hand and I was next to them. All of a sudden, I felt a hand swipe my bottom and then work its way up before I turned around to face Cedric, a boy from the neighborhood. I didn't think about it. I was swift. All the wrestling my brothers had taught me came in handy. I grabbed him by his curls and I slammed him to the ground, sat on him, and got to punching. I could hear Poopy's cheering and my mother screaming for me to stop. No way, I was enjoying it too much. Say you're sorry, punk, I demanded. I didn't stop punching Cedric until he finally apologized. Then I got up and Poopy yelled, "Now stump him," and so I did. I soon developed a reputation as the girl who beats up the boys, but I also fought girls quite a bit. I was an equal opportunist brawler. My dad and my brothers loved it. Usually, whenever a fight started, one of the boys would run into our house and scream at the rest of the family, "Chase fighting! Come outside!" Dad would run outside with my brothers, and all of them would be very scared. My mom would run outside with Rosie, and both of them would be very scared. Mom would be screaming for somebody to stop the fight, but Dad wouldn't let anyone step in. He would say, "Let her learn to defend herself." I was not a girl who picked fights. I was a nerd, a straight-A student. I usually got along with everyone, but if a boy touched me, it was on. I would turn right around and sock him in the mouth and then get him on the ground and start punching. Nobody was going to touch me and get away with it. And that was precisely what started the big drama of 1983. One evening in early November, I could hear my mother shouting at my father, "That's it, Pedro, I'm done with Jenni. I can't even begin to count how many times I've had to pick her up from school for fighting. It's so embarrassing." My mother was furious. I could hear her all the way from the kitchen as she heated up tortillas for my father's dinner. He was sitting in the dining room listening to my mom's rant while eating. I was in my bedroom right next to them, staring at all my menudo posters I had pinned to the walls. I loved spending time there with Rosie and telling her how one day I was going to kiss Ricky Melendez and get stuck up to his braces, as if she could really understand what I was talking about at the tender age of 2. Mom wasn't letting up. Everyone expects a mother to pick up her teenage gangster from getting in trouble, but who do I walk out of the office? With my daughter. This time, she's gone too far. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 6. This time I got in a fight with an African-American boy and it created racial problems at school. Everyone was talking about it and it caused more trouble than the school officials can handle. They're having a director's meeting tomorrow and they will decide if she will be expelled or transferred to another school. Que vergüenza. How embarrassing. I'm not going to show my face this time. Rosie looked at me and even she knew that Mom was mad at me and something serious was bound to happen. Her beautiful brown eyes were wide open and I told her to shush with one finger over my lips. I didn't want to miss my dad's response. "You don't seem too fussed over when you go to the awards assemblies and she's getting her outstanding student awards, do you?" my father said. "You're full of joy when you get notices in the mail letting you know that your daughter is the only Hispanic female on the honor roll, aren't you? I don't think you should come down on her so hard when she gets in a little trouble." "A little trouble?" my mom shouted. "Didn't you hear me when I said she most likely will be expelled? I know my daughter. I'm sure she had a reason for slapping the crap out of that boy." That's my daddy, I thought to myself. He always had my back. But what happened exactly? On Halloween Day 1983, an African-American boy grabbed me and I turned around and I popped him right in the mouth. He socked me right back and busted my lower lip. Eddie, a friend of mine who lived in the same street, saw it all. Eddie did what any other boy in our barrio would have done. He punched the boy right in the face and knocked the living daylights out of him. That's the way we did it in the hood. We had each other's backs. Mexicans defended Mexicans. Besides, it was a female who had been hit. It was on now. The racial war at Stevens Junior High had begun. African Americans against Mexicans. Within weeks, it grew into a citywide issue. African Americans and Mexicans were caught in rumbles all around major junior high and high schools. There were fights throughout the city streets, especially in the west side. All of this happened for grabbing a girl, Jenni Rivera. I headed to school the following day wondering what they would do with me. I had a feeling I wasn't going to be able to finish my 9th grade with my best friends Ruby and Alma and the rest of our homegirls. The counselors and decision makers at our school were all African American. I was a straight-A student and honor roll, but that wasn't going to matter. What mattered was that I was Mexican and dared to mess with one of their own. Sure enough, that morning I was kicked out. And sure enough, my proud father came to get me. We didn't say a word on the way home. Instead, my father played the car radio full blast and we listened to Vicente Fernandez El Rey. We stopped at our favorite place, 31 Flavors. I got a scoop of Camocha almond fudge on a sugar cone as a reward. I was transferred to Bancroft Junior High in Lakewood Village to complete the rest of my 9th grade year. Academically, I remained a straight-A student, but my behavior, however, changed quite a bit. I found myself surrounded by Caucasian girls whose main concern were their looks and not who was a better fighter. I soon wanted to be and look more feminine. My mother was happy to see her daughter was looking and acting like the young lady she always wanted. The change also brought on something that I wasn't used to attention from boys. My parents weren't familiar with this either. At Stevens, I was the nerd, my friends were all beautiful, and they were the ones getting all the attention from the boys. I was considered a bookworm that everyone respected, but not the girl anyone hit on. At Bancroft, this was no longer the case. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 7. I love to dance more than I love to sing. Since I wasn't allowed to go out and join my friends at neighborhood parties or go to school dances, I would dance at home. Every afternoon, I would go to my parents' room and change the Spanish station my father had programmed in his radio to the English station that played the music I wanted to listen to. The Sugar Hill Gang, Midnight Star, and the Tom Tom Club. That would get me dancing when my parents and brothers weren't looking. Other times, depending on my mood, I would listen to something more mellow, and I would find stations that played Peaches and Herb, Marvin Gaye, and Diana Ross. My father and I were engaged in a permanent battle because I would always forget to change the dial back to his Spanish station. During the summer of 1983, I was 14, and I met a boy named Sergio, my first puppy love. Sergio lived in Summit and Canal in one of the more dangerous neighborhoods in the west side of Long Beach. He introduced me to the oldies but goodies that all the cholos in the neighborhood would listen to and bump in their boomboxes and lowrider cars. Brenton Wood, the Delphonics, Mary Wells, Smokey Robinson. My dad saw me talking to Sergio on the corner hill in Santa Fe one day as Sergio walked me to the bus stop on the way to school. I can remember only 2 times during my childhood that my father hit me. He said he wouldn't lay a hand on La Reina de Long Beach, but when he did, it was serious. When he came home from work that afternoon, he slapped me across the face so hard that I flew across the living room. There was no way that his queen would be seen with any cholos. They could be my friends, but not my boyfriends. My father warned me that if I didn't stop seeing Sergio, he would force me to drop out of school. To me, it was nothing more important than school, so that marked the end of my puppy love with Sergio, but it didn't really matter. He had opened me up to yet another style of music. At the nearly all-white Bancroft Junior High, I was introduced to yet another musical world. The gringos wouldn't listen to the funk artists that the homies at Stevens did. Yes, they listened to Michael Jackson, but everybody was a fan of Thriller back then. We were on the school bus going back home. They would ask the bus driver to change the stereo dial to pop stations, and they went crazy over the Police, Depeche Mode, and some singer named Madonna. During this time, I met Alfredo. His brother and my brother Pete played baseball on the same team. Alfredo was my age, and he went to DeMille Junior High down the street from my new school. We stopped taking our prospective school buses and would take the city bus to and from school to spend a little time together. He would always carry his Walkman and would share with me as we sat in the back of the bus. He brought all kinds of tapes with him and introduced me to Duran Duran, disco, alternative rock, and some ridiculous loud screaming music I didn't quite understand. He said it was called heavy metal. Alfredo and I were seeing each other for 2 months. Then I found out that he lived on the same street as Sergio. This led to a few fights and Sergio stabbing Alfredo in the ribs. I saved them both from trouble for fighting for my honor because around the same time my brother Gus had seen my rockabilly boyfriend Alfredo macking with another girl at a quinceañera. I was heartbroken and I immediately broke it off. About a day I thought the world would end, but once again I was happy to have been open up to more music through that short-lived relationship. I added Alfredo's cassettes to the rest of the repertoire I had gathered during my childhood and teenage years, and I moved right along to search my great next love and my next musical awakening. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 8. When I was 13 and 14, I had my puppy loves with Sergio and Alfredo. Trino became Gus's friend and would come over to our house sometimes. My dad warned Gus and my other brothers about bringing guys over to the house. You open the doors of your house to your friends and they take your sister or your wife. He still believes that to this day. Because of this, Trino stopped coming over, but one way or another, call it destiny, the devil, or God's will, our paths crossed one day on Parade Street. On that day, 1984, it wasn't Poopy walking with me to my friend's house, but a beautiful blonde living doll, my little sister Rosie, who was almost 3 years old. I remember how cool and charming he was, and how I was infatuated with him. Now my stomach turns at the thought of finding Trino so attractive. My story with this man is horrific, but of course it did not start out that way. By June that year, Trino and I had started seeing each other in secret. I thought he was incredibly attractive. He dressed like a rebel and listened to Spanish rock. He was very charismatic and funny and a good storyteller. Most people who met Trino liked him instantly. I know I did. On July 2nd, I turned 15 and I wasn't able to have the traditional quinceañera that most Mexican families have for their daughters. We couldn't afford it. My daddy made a deal with me. I had a choice between my parents somehow getting the money to pay a quinceañera or getting a car later when they could afford it. Of course, I went with the car, which I never got. Meanwhile, my celebration was to dress up in the fanciest dress and take a ride top down in my dad's old convertible. I felt like a princess sitting with the top down of that beat-up car, cruising with my daddy, my hero, through the streets of Long Beach. And I realized this was my daddy's way of confirming to me that, as he always called me, not the princess, pero la reina de Long Beach. I was so content and happy. However, my daddy wasn't too happy when the ride was over, and I told him that now that I was of age, Trino wanted to come over and talk to him about officially dating me. Back in those days, the custom was for boys to meet with the girl's parents and ask for permission face-to-face to date their daughter. I thought this was so manly of Trino. My parent okayed Trino's request, and I consider this to be my first true relationship. Actually, he became my first true everything. I was perfectly convinced that he was the love of my life. Pobre mensa. One day, during visitation time, my father caught Trino and me kissing under the avocado tree. I guess that must have been hard for him to see. When I came into the house, my father stopped me at the dining room table before I came into my bedroom. Jenni, si te va a chingar. This motherfucker is going to screw you, he told me. Daddy knew that at the tender age of 21, that Trino's intentions were not on the same level as my teenage desires. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera. Part 9. That September, I started school in Long Beach Polytechnic High. Even though it wasn't in the best neighborhood, everyone I knew wanted to go to Poly High, the home of the scholars and champions. My brother Pete had graduated from there in June, and Gus attended temporarily before getting kicked out for punching a teacher. So had baseball player Tony Gwynn and tennis legend Billie Jean King, among many other famous alumni. When Lupillo was there a few years later, Snoop Dogg and Cameron Diaz were also students. Of course, we didn't know any of them would become such huge stars then. One day I thought, I will say that Jenni Rivera went there too. I was doubly excited to go to Poly because it meant that I would be reunited with my friends I left behind at Stevens Junior High when I got kicked out. Finally, I would be able to hang out with my homies, the Mexicans, Samoans, Filipinos, Womanians, African Americans, and all the people that were like me, a minority. We would kick it together at lunch or in the middle of periods and after school. Since during the day I didn't have many classes with my friends, I was in the nerd classes, as they put it. The only class I shared with a few of them was band. I played the clarinet and reached the first clarinet status in the Long Beach Unified School District. I was getting straight A's with all my nerd classes and looking forward to everything high school had to offer. But in November, everything came to a stop. The story begins on a warm September 9. Trino and I had a chaperone, my younger brother Poopy, went to a drive-in movie to watch Princess Purple Rain. Halfway through the movie, Trino sent Poopy to the snack bar to get popcorn and candy, and it happened right there and then, in the back of his 1979 Monte Carlo. I can't say he forced me because obviously I enjoy the feeling of his touch, but I got scared and asked him to pull out before I had completely penetrated me. I figured since I didn't feel anything, nothing had happened. In reality, everything had happened. November came around and I still hadn't gotten my period. I wonder if I could have gone pregnant by the Holy Spirit. Was it still possible? I was so naive and stupid. Or maybe I was just in denial. Yes, I had learned about pregnancy in health class, but I didn't want to face the truth. It couldn't be. Wasn't it supposed to be an unforgettable experience like all the girls had talked about? Not in my case, not a chance in my life. I'd become pregnant. I was in dancing class with Patty, my brother Gus's girlfriend and now wife. One afternoon, I didn't show up and Patty asked Gus where I had been. I had gone to the clinic to get a pregnancy test. When I came home that afternoon, Gus wanted to know where I had been during dance class. I had no choice. I had to tell him. He broke down in tears when he heard the news. How could it be? How could you do this to our family? This wasn't supposed to be this way, Jenni. He told me I had to tell Pete, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't face him. I left the house before he came home from work that night. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 10. Soon after, I sat with my mother and gave her the horrible news. It was a great disappointment to her, an extremely sad moment for a 15-year-old girl such as me. I didn't know that Lupe, who was 12 at the time, had been sitting in my bedroom listening to the whole conversation. As a customary in Mexican culture in those days, I wasn't going to be able to live at home anymore. I would have to move in with Trino and we would have to get married. My mother was scared of what my father might do, so she had me leave before he got home. I had to pick up my clothes and whatever belongings I was taking with me to the new home while my little brother and sister Juan and Rosie were watching me. They were too young and innocent to know what was going on, but Lupe knew exactly what was going to happen. I gathered my things in a plastic trash bag, and I gave my angry mother a kiss and a hug goodbye, and I headed out the door towards the driveway where the father of my child I was carrying awaited. I took one step to the front door in my childhood home, and then Lupe stormed out of my bedroom crying, screaming and pleading with my mother not to let me go. "No, Mom," he sobbed. "Please don't let her go. I don't want to be here without my sister. She can stay in her room, and the baby can stay with us in the garage. It will be okay." He was inconsolable. My mother looked at him and began to cry as she brought her hands to her face. She couldn't say a word. Lupe wouldn't give up. He grabbed me tightly by the arm and looked at me in the eye and begged, "Please stay with me, Jenni. Please don't go." I'll never forget the look on his face, the fear in his face, and his words and the rivers of tears that rolled down his cheeks. As I type these words, I am crying, remembering how badly he tried to hold me back on that night that changed my life forever. Did he, at the age of 12, sense some kind of situation in which I soon be living? Did he have a premonition about how my life would be with this man? I don't know, but sometimes I think my brother sensed that this man would be the root of the Rivera's most tragic and painful experience. I dropped my bag on the ground and hugged him, and I continued crying as I kissed him goodbye. I picked my belongings and I walked over to Trino. I left Lupe crying at the front door of our Long Beach house. I left my baby sister and brother with no clue as to what was going on, and I left Pete and Gus so disappointed and heartbroken, and I left my mother who was crying and hurt that she could barely speak. I got into the beige Monte Carlo that would drive me to his family's Wilmington home where I lived as a little girl, and I began a life that nobody would have hoped for La Reina de Long Beach. Years later, I found out that when my father came home from work that day and asked where I was, my mom told him that I ran away with Trino. Dad was so upset. For the next 3 days, he continually asked my mom if I had called. On the third day, she told him the truth. He went onto his bedroom to turn on the radio, and for the first time in a long time, as he tuned in the Spanish station, I hadn't been there to change it. He cried that night as the music played, for he knew that I was gone. Life would never be the same for our entire family, and it certainly wouldn't be the same for me. Trino and I were living in a garage in the back of his family's house in Blinn Avenue in Wilmington. He was the only man in the house full of women. The thing with his mother and all his sisters hated me. They all thought that I wasn't good enough for him because I was an American girl. In their eyes, all American girls were whores, and Trino should have married a Mexican girl from their ranch. They treated me badly, but nothing was compared to the shit that Trino put me through. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 11. Our garage apartment became the boxing ring for many verbal and physical fights we would have during our 8-year relationship. Those walls would witness the first tears I shed as a married woman and the tears that would continue to flow for the years to come. He had only brought me to live with him because he wanted to show everyone he was a responsible man and he didn't want to publicly disgrace me and my family. But Trino insisted the baby was not his. He didn't believe the story the doctors gave him. In his mind, it couldn't possibly be pregnant without fully doing it. Not only that, he said no woman of his was going to continue going to school. Trino wanted me to drop out and stay at home and be a full-blown housewife. What about my grades and my education, I asked. What about my future, how important it is to accomplish something and be my family's pride and joy? That's done and over with, he responded. I'm already doing enough by having you here after you slept with someone else and got yourself pregnant. I won't put up with my woman going to school as she were still a normal teenager. That's not the way it happens in my family. That's not the way it's going to be with me. I couldn't believe it. What the hell did I get myself into? As the days went on, I kept insisting and I couldn't convince him to change his mind. I couldn't. Instead, I learned what it felt like to be slapped in the face by a man. "Oh no, you didn't, motherfucker," I yelled at him. As soon as he did it, I was fucking pissed. I immediately fell back to my tomboy ways and did what I had been trained to do. I fought back. "I ain't scared of you, you little bitch," I said. "I'll fuck you up." Obviously, I couldn't do so. He was so stronger than me. That was not the last time he slapped me in the face. It happened more times than I would like to admit. But I enjoyed getting back at him when I catch him off guard. I would wait until he was asleep and beat his ass. This was the way our relationship went up to years to come. The women in my family used to tell me, "You aren't supposed to do that. You're supposed to let them hit you." My nana was this old school religious little lady, and our grandfather used to hit her while she looked down at the ground and took it. I told her, "Fuck that, nana. If he hits me, I'm going to hit him back." Eventually, I got my way after much arguing and not giving into his macho idiotic ways, and I took my pregnant eyes to Reed High School, a continuation school down the street. Reed specialized in educating the more troublesome students and the pregnant teenagers. In addition to my regular academic classes, the teacher would prepare me for childbirth. I'm glad I persisted because at that school, I learned what was going on with my pregnant body. Ms. McFerrin, my home economics and child development teacher, would always remind me that I had to be a pregnant, happy girl. She said and actually showed me in different textbooks that a human being personalities form in the womb. She assured me that what I put my fetus through during pregnancy would mold my child's character for life. I believed her and later had full proof that it was true. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 12. 3 months after I left my parents' house, they were begging me to move back. Despite life with Trino being a living hell, I wouldn't do it. They had kicked me out and I was too proud and stubborn to turn around and forget what had happened. No, I was going to stick it out and I was going to make things work out and be a gangster wife just like my mommy. Our first daughter, Jenni, later to be nicknamed Chiquis, was born on June 26, 1985, 6 days before my 60th birthday. Despite Trino's accusations, she looked just like him. I brought her home to my parents' house on July 1st during Rosie's 4th birthday party. They were about to cut the cake when I walked in holding this beautiful green-eyed baby. Rosie was pissed. She had always been my baby and was not too happy when she was being replaced. I promised her that I would never leave her, and I assured her that she'd still be my baby too. Everyone fell in love with Chiquis, especially her tia Rosie. Trino and I moved into the back house of my parents' lot so my mother could help me with Chiquis while I worked my shift at KFC. Unfortunately, this also meant that my family would witness a lot of the ugly altercations between Trino and me, even though I tried to keep them secret. I gained 80 pounds during the pregnancy, and Trino told me that now I was too fat to be his woman. He was constantly calling me names and humiliating me about my looks. I felt so ugly, fat, and worthless, but I never wanted to let anyone know about this. In my family, they always call me Unbreakable, and I never wanted to shatter this image for myself. On the outside, I kept my head up and maintained the tough girl image. However, inside I was dying because I wanted nothing more than to shut Trino up. I began fat dieting, and I had lost excess weight about a year and a half after having Chiquis. Then, he became jealous and obsessive. I couldn't win. By the last few days of 1987, Trino and I were living in a trailer home that we had purchased in Carson. I was working as a cashier at Video One on Willow Street. This was during the time of the VHS craze, and the place was always full of customers, many of them men. One day I received a bouquet of flowers at work, and I stupidly thought it was a message from Trino trying to make up after yet another fight. When he came to pick me up that night, I jumped in the car and I gave him a kiss, thanking him. In a blink of an eye, he slapped me across the face and the flowers flew out the window. That night, I didn't even try to fight back. Instead, I cried myself to sleep and felt myself falling deeper into depression. I never did find out who sent me those flowers. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 14. On the day I was discharged, I silently repeated that prayer to myself on the way back to my parents' house. My brother Pete was driving and my mother sat in the passenger seat, and I sat in the back. Pete kept looking at me through his rearview mirror as Lean on Me played in the radio. I felt ready to face the world. I was ready for a fresh start and I had a new outlook in life. I was finally determined to leave Trino for good. After Los Amigos, my daughter and I stayed with my parents. I took it day by day. Made it through February without getting back with Trino, then March. I made it through the entire spring. I was focused on going to school and being a good mother to Chiquis, who was now almost 2 years old. That June, I graduated from high school and I was a valedictorian of my class. I was offered 8 different college scholarships. Trino came to the ceremony and afterward pleaded with me once again to come back to our trailer home in Carson. Not tonight, I told him. I'm going to grad night. You're not taking me? He asked. I guess not, since I have a date, I responded proudly. 3's a crowd, baby. We'll talk another day. I jumped at the school bus with my date Al and the rest of us seniors. It was my first time at Disneyland and for once I felt like a normal teenager. I wanted to take advantage of the scholarships I had been offered, so that summer in 1987, I began taking classes at Long Beach City College. Though I was focused on my studies and goals, guess what? Yep, I did it again. I took him back. I went back to the I want to be like my mom spirit. Back to the violence, to the fistfights, back to the loud arguments, another year of never-ending screaming and boxing matches. I became concerned with Chiquis living in this unstable environment and how it was affecting her. I decided to leave the trailer in Carson that I had helped pay for. To me, the lost money was worth my freedom. So at the end of 1988, I packed up and took my daughter back to my parents' house in Long Beach. As a mother, I learned to put my pride aside and do what's best for my child, even though this meant admitting failure to my marriage. I was only 19 years old. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 15. For about 2 months, my life was stable and quiet without Trino in it. But then my world came crashing down again. It was February 11, 1989. I was leaving my job at the Warehouse Music Store at the Long Beach Mall. I could sense something bad was going to happen. I had stayed over time to do stock count and left a bit late that night. It was about 10:15 p.m. I was walking through the empty parking lot towards my 1986 Toyota Supra. I heard a pair of quick steps coming towards me behind. It was Trino. I want us to talk, he said. I argued with him before I finally agreed to discuss things with him. We sat in his Nissan Maxima, talking for a while before he began kissing me. Ahí va la pendeja. I wanted him to stop when things got heated, but he wouldn't. You asked for it. You can't mess with me like that, he yelled at me. Fearing that I would make things worse, and because I hadn't gotten any in a while, I gave in. I can't blame it all on him. I was stupid enough to put myself in that predicament. I asked him to use protection or pull out. Since I wasn't sexually active, I wasn't using contraception, but I had learned about ovulation method and I was positive I could get pregnant that day. So Trino ignored my pleas and with an evil look in his face said, "Fuck that." That night I went home knowing that I had conceived another child. So I was once again living in my parents' home and pregnant. I contemplating having an abortion, but one day, as I sat in my bedroom attempting to do my homework, my mother walked in my room and found me crying. I told her the truth. Considering what I was thinking, I'm glad I did. "You can't have an abortion," she said. "I won't let you do it. It wouldn't be fair to a life that God has planned for. Believe me, one day you will appreciate my advice." That day, I decided to keep the baby, but not wanting to face my father with the news, I had also decided to move back in with Trino. I packed up my belongings and headed to the trailer park in Carson with my 4-year-old daughter. When I knocked on the door of the trailer, Trino answered and immediately asked me what I was doing there. I told him I was pregnant and I couldn't take advantage of my parents any longer. I knew they were disappointed in me and I wanted to show them that we could work things out. "You can stay," Trino said, "but don't hold me responsible for whatever might happen." He didn't want us there. He seemed to be having too much fun being a bachelor and had no interest in the marriage life. However, he did have an interest in belittling me, calling me names, and trying to stop me from achieving my goals. He told me I would never complete my associate's degree because I was pregnant and depressed. I put up with more with him during that time than ever in our relationship. I was committed to making it work, but I was also committed to proving him wrong and wasn't about to let him win. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 17. One night, when we were living in my brother's garage, I woke up to the sound of someone starting my car. I got up to look out the window, and soon Chiquis woke up and was standing by my side. We watched helplessly as two masked men stole my little Honda. I was 7 months pregnant and standing beside my 4-year-old daughter in that cold garage apartment. I couldn't move. I stared into the darkness as I recalled that I had nothing but a liability insurance on that car. The theft would not be covered. I couldn't afford a new car. I was barely getting by as it was. What the hell was I going to do now? I had to get to work and school and had to get Chiquis to daycare. I must have been lost in my thoughts for a while. Then I felt my daughter softly tugging at my pajamas. "Mommy, Mommy, listen to me." I looked down at her beautiful face. "You let them borrow it, right, Mommy? They're going to bring it back in the morning so you can take me to school, right?" I fought back the tears as I looked into her eyes, those green eyes I so dearly love. At that moment, I wanted to see the world through those eyes badly. I wanted to be young and innocent and believe in the good in the world. But I had to be strong for my babies. That night, after filing a police report, I laid in bed thinking I would pull through this for my daughters. I was having another girl, so the ultrasound had shown. I would not let the three of us down, the three musketeers, I thought, trying to smile, but instead I quietly cried myself to sleep, making sure my baby couldn't hear my sobs. I could have gone to my parents and brothers for help. They would have given me everything they had if I asked them, but my pride would not allow it. Deep inside, I felt that I had to prove to myself and the world that I was strong enough to make it on my own. I wanted so badly to be the example of strength for my little girl. At that moment, I was down, but one day I was going to be at top of the world with my daughters by my side. With or without a man, I was going to make them proud and have me as a mother. I was going to make my parents proud once again to have me as a daughter. The following day, I called in sick and skipped class. I took Chiquis with me to purchase a 10-speed bike. I found a used child seat for her and strapped it to the back of my new vehicle. The bike would be my means of transportation until I could save enough money for a down payment on another car. But this bike wouldn't be an easy steal. I didn't dare to leave it outside, and I parked it where it belonged, right next to my daughter and me in the garage. Home, sweet home. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 19. I gained 60 pounds when I was pregnant with Michael, and after I delivered him, I was hit with the baby blues. When I least expected it, the fights with Trino were back, and they were much worse this time. Once again, he belittled me and called me fat. He got heated and jealous over the most minor situations. I was bringing in most of the money and bearing the financial responsibilities of raising 3 kids and paying a mortgage. Maybe that made him insecure, so he tried to keep me down. Who knows? It's crazy how violent, possessive relationships can become so addictive. For so long, I kept going back for more, and each time I did, I somehow believed that would strengthen our love. It seemed impossible for me to live without the father of my children and the first man in my life. It didn't help much that I was still intent on being like my mother and hanging in there forever. I can't ever be with another man, I thought. My father wouldn't allow it. Yet over the years, my father came to know how rocky our relationship was. I didn't know it at the time, but Rosie would report back on the abuse she witnessed whenever she slept over. And when we lived in the back of the house or nearby on 55th Street, the rest of my family would hear our fights. As hard as it was for them, my daddy told my brothers to never get involved in anyone's relationship and to mind their own business, and so they didn't intervene. But one day during the early summer of 1992, my father surprised me by not following his own advice. We were sitting at the dining room table at my parents' house in Ellis Street. Daddy looked at me and asked, "Aren't there other men in the world, mija? Why are you so stuck on this one? Do you not feel worthy of being loved and admired by another fish in the ocean?" I was surprised, but happy to hear him say such words. It meant that if I did someday date, and fall in love with someone else, it would be okay with him. Since he was the boss, it would have to be okay with the rest of my family too. It was on. I was sick of Trino's shit, and in August 1992, he hit me for the last time. I was too tired to fight back. Instead, I called the cops and put his ass in jail. This time we were over for good. Something in me finally said, no more. While he was in jail, I began going out with my friends. I was 23 and had never been to a club aside from singing competitions. I'd gone with my father. I hardly went out at all. When you get pregnant at 15, that kind of thing falls on the wayside. And when you're married to a man like Trino, forget about it. Now I no longer had to had him running my life, and I could make up a bit for the lost time. I learned how to have fun, drink, and let loose, and enjoy being able to dance again like when I was young, carefree at the backyard barbecues or in my parents' bedroom. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 20. It had been 12 years since that day in 1980 when I told my father I would never touch a microphone again. But he had been right, that one day I would end up on stage without his pushing or persuading me. All it took was a dare. I decided to record and complete an album for my father as a birthday gift. I knew how much it would mean to him, and I had fun doing it. I went into the studio and sang under the name Jenni Rivera. The title out of the album was Somos Rivera. I never thought anyone would hear it besides my dad, but he fell in love with it and asked me if he could promote it under his record label Cintas Acuario. Do whatever you want with it, I told him. It's yours. But if you're going to promote it, use the name Jenni and spell it with an I. I never thought anything would come of it, but that album was what launched my recording career. It's not as if it was an overnight success, but I got some feedback and it made me think that maybe my father was right. Maybe I did have a future in this. But as soon as I asked the question, I was knocked down back again. In 1994, I got a small gig in Encitas near San Diego, an opening for another singer who was one of my father's artists. I had to pay for gas, food, and wardrobe out of my own pockets, and I was making only $300. As I was walking to the bathroom, I heard a friend of my dad's talking to the manager who had hired me. They were outside and I was walking on the grass. They didn't hear me approaching. My dad's friend said, "Who did you invite to open?" "I got this new girl, Jenni Rivera," the manager told him. "Why did you invite her? She can't sing. She's ugly and she has a bad attitude." I was hurt and I was pissed. My father produced this man's daughter's music, and now here he was talking crap about me to other people in the industry. I went on stage not long after that and sang my heart out, trying to prove myself more than anyone else that I belong on that stage. But I wasn't so sure. All I wanted was to go home to my kids. As soon as I was done, I went into the manager and I asked him for my $300. "Oh, I'll pay you," he said, "after you have sex with me." I was horrified and heated, but could do little. I told that asshole right off, and I walked out of there without getting paid. When I got home, I told my dad, "I'm never singing again. This industry is too ugly. I was not putting myself through this crap, and I can make more money in real estate anyways." "I understand, mija," he responded, "but please do me one more favor and record one more album. I have all the songs and lyrics." I could never say no to my father. I recorded that second album, and it got attention from some people at Balboa Records. I signed on to do a third album with them, which I titled La Maestra. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 23. However, a corrido I wrote called La Chacalosa had earned me a special underground following with certain group in LA. The lyrics told the story of a narca female who was making it big in the business. At the time, the LA area had many popular dealers. My corrido appealed to them, and many of these mafiosos knew who I was and respected me. They would see Marisela and me around the clubs and make sure we were taken care of. One night, a dealer insisted that I sing La Chacalosa for him. He had the power to stop the DJ and order a live norteño group to play whatever he wanted to hear. He came to our table and said, "Go up there and sing my corrido, girl. I'll pay you whatever you want." Of course, I wasn't going to charge the men a dime. "Go for it," Marisela told me with an approving look. I went on stage with El Vampiro y sus Fantasmas, and they began to play La Chacalosa. Halfway through the song, a tall, dark, handsome man came on stage with a friend and asked the photographer of the club to take a Polaroid of all three of us while I was performing. Because I was so used to the attention from fans, I didn't think much of it. Marisela and I left the club with the rest of the VIP clients at 2:30 in the morning. We walked out the parking lot where only a few cars were left. As we walked towards my Toyota Camry, we noticed two men walking our direction. When they got closer, I realized one of them was a handsome guy who had taken a picture with me and one of his friends. "Hi, Jenni." The man introduced himself. as Juan. We talked a bit, and then they asked us for a late-night dinner at Las Playas, a 24-hour restaurant in Bell. Maricela was cautious and immediately responded that we couldn't. Vámonos, güera, she whispered to me. We don't know them. It's getting late anyway. Thanks, but we can't. I told Juan it was nice meeting you. We couldn't take his eyes off me. Then give me your autograph and your phone number, and I give him both. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 25. Despite his many defects, Juan did have valuable virtues. He was respectful to my family and kids. He wanted to maintain a good relationship with my loved ones. He wasn't possessive or jealous like my ex-husband, and he wouldn't question or interrogate me every time I left the house. He would push me to do better, and he thought I was intelligent and had my back if I wanted to continue my education. He gave me enough space to go out in the field and to find real estate clients. He believed in my talent, and although I still didn't take my singing career seriously, he knew that if I tried, I would one day make it. My girl will be the best in her genre, he'd tell me and his family. Also, in the case of Trino, I had a beautiful relationship with Juan's family. I knew he loved me, and I loved him too. With all of this in mind, I wanted to stay with him forever. I was certain that this relationship was going to work. However, it wasn't always so fine and dandy. Sure, it was great at the beginning, but things took a turn for the worse when I least expected it. During January 1996, with the funds I had saved after a few close sales, I was able to put down a payment on my FHA loan for a house on Keene Avenue in Compton. Because I had filed for bankruptcy in 1995, I couldn't purchase it under my name. Therefore, both the loan and the title were under Juan's name. I paid for the house, but he was the legal owner. I trusted my man. What a dumbass. Our fights were never as violent as physical as the fights with Trino, but we did have our many matches. There would be some pushing and shoving here and there. If I do recall correctly, in February 1996, a weekend night, the kids were visiting Trino and his new girlfriend Dora as they did every weekend. Juan and I had an argument about something so minor that I can't even remember what it was. To cool off, I went shopping at Target in Carson for a couple of hours. When I came home, he was gone. Our bedroom smelled of his cologne, and I noticed the flat iron was out. That night, we were supposed to go to his friend's wedding together, and I couldn't believe that he had left without me. I sat at home, waited. Midnight came around, then 1, then 2, and he still wasn't back. I was furious, and I plotted a way to get back at him. Finally, at 2:30 in the morning came, and his car pulled into the driveway. I was hiding by the side of the house. As soon as I heard the motor turn off, I jumped out and screamed, "Surprise!" With all my strength, I threw a brick straight towards the front shield of his Grand Marquis. As soon as I saw the crack open into pieces, I ran at top speed back into the house. I could hear him swearing up a storm, and I ran into the front yard, through the living room, towards the bedroom. I didn't make it to my destination. My race to safety came to a stop on the floor in the hallway. We pushed, pulled, and shoved each other. I tore his trademark chain off his neck. It was like cutting his finger off. In the end, he pushed me a little too hard, and because I refused to ever take any physical abuse from anyone, I called the Compton police. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 26. When the cops arrived, I was sitting in the living room. By then, Juan was a lot calmer and could reason better than I could. The police officers asked him to leave to make sure another confrontation would be avoided. "I can't," Juan told him. "I've been drinking." "Then you need leave me with no other option," the police officer said. "We will have to arrest you." "If you arrest me, you're going to have to arrest her too," Juan told him, as he showed off the scratch marks I had left on his chest. The officer turned to me. "Did you do that, ma'am?" "I sure as hell did," I answered, and I put my wrists together so he could snap the handcuffs on me. Juan looked at me. "Jenny, stop. We can still drop the charges. Be smart." "Nah, fool," I responded. "We're going to jail." They drove us in separate police cars, and I couldn't believe this was really happening. There I was in the back of a police car as the officers stopped by in a drive-through donut shop on Rosecrans and Central. Then they took me to Compton jail. I sat in the cold, hard floor wondering what the hell I had been thinking. The cops interviewed us and tried to meditate the situation. That's when I heard Juan say, "Well, the house is mine, and it's not yours." This was the first sign of him being greedy, and the first red flag as many to come. I was so mad at him, and even more mad at myself. I called my brother Juan from jail that night. Although I'd probably be released the next few days, Juan begged my parents to bail me out. He couldn't bear his sister spending another time in jail. Since the O.J. Simpson case, major changes had occurred to the law, and domestic violence bail amounts were much higher. My parents had to come up with 10% of the $50,000 plus. Then they put their title of their house as collateral. Of course, I paid my parents back the $5,000 back as soon as I could. That's what I got for being a stupid shit. Eventually, Juan and I dropped all the charges against each other. I realized it was so many incidents before and after I was at fault. I wasn't perfect. One of the greatest things about Juan was that he could easily forgive and forget. We vowed to try harder and to make it work for the sake of our love and the kids. Juan told me that despite our differences and problems, he never wanted to see me with someone else. Our efforts worked for a while until he was arrested on August 1st of that same year. During his 7 months in prison, he was transferred from El Centro, California to Arizona to Oklahoma and finally to a correctional facility in Big Spring, Texas. I wanted to make sure I did whatever I could to make those 7 months as bearable as possible for him. I loved him, and I wanted to be his gangsta bitch and have his back. During Thanksgiving weekend, I bought a plane ticket and flew to Texas to see him. I rented a car and drove in the pouring rain and got lost on my way to Big Spring. I didn't care. The only thing in my mind was to surprise him and let him know how much I loved him. I rented a hotel room for the weekend and I visited him each day. We talked about what we were going to do when he got out and how we were both going to be better for each other and for ourselves. I told him of how I drove around in the different radio stations and to deliver the master copy of La Chacalosa to them, but none of them were playing it because I wouldn't pay off the disc jockeys. He told me not to worry and that I was going to be a big star one day, and he was sure of it. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 27. Fast forward 2 months to me sitting on the pavement on the street in Compton, waiting for the 3 men in the white sports cars to drive away, feeling the pain and shame of what had just happened to me. Hearing the granite monster hissing, "Aren't you a singles lady?" and "Leave me alone," over and over. I sat on the pavement long after I saw the taillights disappear. I wanted to make sure they were really gone. Once I felt they were never coming back, I lifted myself off the curb and walked over to my car to get myself home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat there in the darkness all alone and shattered inside. I didn't feel like the same Jenni anymore. Ever since I was a little girl, I was a fighter. I could go toe-to-toe with any of the boys from the neighborhood. But my will had been taken away. I was no longer the tough, brave, invisible girl my brothers and father had raised. I had lost my first fight. The mixture of fear and sadness and hatred, deep shame, took over me. I relived the trauma in my head over and over, wondering I could have done differently. Why did I get out of the car? Why hadn't I been smart enough to memorize their plates? Why didn't I pull in the gas station on Central Avenue and scream for help? Why didn't I kick them as my brothers had taught me? I decided I wouldn't tell anyone and I wouldn't call the cops. I wouldn't worry my parents or any of my family members. I wouldn't dare to tell my kids. Instead, I kept it inside and fell into deep depression all on my own. I didn't want anyone to know I was no longer the intelligent warrior my father was so proud of. That Jenni was gone forever. She had disappeared in the back of that white sports car. Juan was released 3 weeks later on February 14, 1997. I picked him up around 8 p.m. at LAX and I tried my best to hide what was going through a difficult time. I had been depressed and deeply suffering since the night of my assault. Juan walked into our bedroom and to find me crying inconsolably. "You don't love me anymore, do you?" he'd say. "You don't seem happy that I'm back home. Please be patient with me right now, babe. I need you at this time, and I do love you very much, more than you can imagine." What he couldn't imagine was that I was not the same woman I had been when he first went to jail. He couldn't imagine how weak my mind was and the trauma I had endured holding each other that night. We cried until we fell asleep. After a few days, because I had felt it was driving me crazy, I told him what had happened. For years, I never told anyone. Confiding in Juan felt good inside. He embraced me so badly and wanted to help me feel better. I couldn't help but wonder if he knew who I was talking about when I described the men with the green eyes who hissed, "Aren't you El Cinco's lady?" But Juan didn't say a word. Soon Juan began a job at Fairchild Fasteners in Torrance. My brother Gus worked there and recommended Juan for a high-paying position. However, Juan was an alien resident who had committed a serious felony. Proceedings for his deportation also began. After analyzing every other option, the attorney we hired advised us that the only way for Juan to avoid deportation would be if he married a U.S. citizen. So what do I do? Right. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 28. We were married in a civil ceremony at Norwalk City Hall on June 9, 1997. I was with my groom, my 3 children, and 4 months pregnant with my 4th child. Juan was excited that we were having a baby. He thought that a baby would keep us together. I was not happy, though this would put a halt to my minimal underground success that I had attained with my song Las Malandrinas. People in the industry assured me that it was a jumping off point, but then there I went and got pregnant. Though I wasn't exactly thrilled about having another baby, I was happy that we were finally experiencing some stability in our relationship. A major part of this newfound peace was due to us attending church regularly. We were both growing spiritually and emotionally. We felt that the bond between us was becoming stronger and stronger, and I was happy I had married him, although I wasn't for the right reasons, nor was it under the best circumstances. I didn't get the wedding I had always dreamed of, but we were planning for one in the near future. Our love, we felt that deserved to be celebrated in a religious ceremony, and we needed God's blessing. In the months after we were married, we were faithful visitors to the Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday services at the Ministerio Lagos, a Baptist church where my brother Pete was assistant pastor. Pete and Pastor Mejias taught the world in a way that he had never taught me before. My reason for leaving was a lot clearer, and so was my spirituality. I felt that for once my life had found peace, and I was good, and God was good, and I learned that He worked in mysterious ways to show us His goodness. On an unbearably hot Sunday of August of that year, I was headed down 91 freeway towards our church. Pastor Tim Mejias had asked all his parishioners to make sure that we attended that particular Sunday. He had invited a prophet, Noe Sierra, to preach and deliver the word of God. Many members of the family were there, and my children and I sat in the pew, desperately wanting to hear the positive promises the Lord had for us. I was excited, but little did I know. God spoke to him in a powerful and surprising way. He began calling members and visitors of the church up to the altar. He'd say a special prayer for everyone he called forward. He prophesied that many that afternoon. Some would find jobs, some would be healed illnesses, and some would grow spiritually. Some would have to make changes to be happier in life. Suddenly, he saw Rosie, who was 16 there sitting quietly at the church pews. He looked at her and pointed her out and asked her to come forward. The Lord has a word for you, young lady, he said. He wants me to tell you that you are special to Him. He loves you. Rosie began to cry and looked at her. No more will it be over right here, right now. The prophet had a stern but tender look in his face. At this moment, all the chains and sadness of depression shall be broken. You will no longer be tied down to those spirits. The spirit of abuse exit her life. I stared in shock, and the spirit of abuse has surrounded your life since you were a little girl. It has saddened and tormented you. You have not been able to be a normal little girl because of it. But God tells me to tell you that it ends here. Sadness no more. Torment no more. I was numb, but I knew that it was truly the Lord who had spoken through the prophet on that unforgettable Sunday morning. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 31. I can say when I found out what Trino had been doing to my babies, everything changed for me. My joy, my motherly dignity, my will to live were ripped away from me. Though I had experienced difficulties in my life previously, I found out then what true suffering meant. Every day, every minute, every second hurt. The pain and trauma of that time is indescribable. As a result from my stress and mental exhaustion, our baby girl, Janica Priscilla Lopez, was born a few weeks early on October 3rd, 1997. I had once prayed for a child to look just like me, and my prayer was answered with Janica. The second people saw her, they said, "She's your twin," and they still do. She was so perfect, so sweet, and so easygoing. From the time she was an infant, I call her Shaniqua. Don't ask me why. I give all my kids and anyone close to me crazy nicknames that only made sense to me. Janica got the most: Shaniqua, Shanice, Chantilly Lace, and Stebanisha Washington. I tried my best to be a happy mother to my newborn baby girl and my other children. I pushed myself to continue being a devoted wife and to my new husband. I still sold real estate and worked part-time at my father's record label, just as I did when I was pregnant. I cleaned the house and woke up at 4 a.m. to cook my husband breakfast and lunch for the day before he left to work at 5 a.m. I tended to my husband's needs as best as I could. I wanted him to be proud of me. I needed his love and support more than ever before, and I didn't want to fail as a wife once again. Unfortunately, by the time I came around, only a month after Janica was born, something did not feel right. Juan wasn't attentive or as caring towards me. He seemed distant and been acting weird. He wasn't as happy to spend time with me as he was before. Making a relationship work was no longer his priority or focus. At first, I wanted to shrug it off and act as if I had noticed the changes. I continued to be affectionate towards him, although he wasn't affectionate in return. I feared that he would stop loving me. I cried in my knees in desperation as I prayed to God every night. "Please, God, not that. I can't go through this right now. Please make him love me like he did before." We began fighting about everything. Everything I did bothered him, from the words I said to going to church to the music I listened to. He didn't like me playing Tupac or Biggie when he was around, and I would change it to something more romantic, such as Sade or Kenny G, but that would only make things worse. We had to listen to the shit he wanted to play. The cooking wasn't good enough anymore. The sink wasn't clean enough. The kids weren't quite enough, and I wasn't good enough either. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 32. In June 1998, my father called me into his office at La Música del Pueblo, one of our family record stores in Pacific Avenue in Huntington Park. But he didn't want to talk about music this time. He told me he heard from someone that Juan was messing around with quite a few people at work. Gus knew, but he did not have the guts to tell me. But my father couldn't bear his daughter being made a fool of and couldn't hold it any longer. I'm not telling you what to do, mija, he said. That's totally up to you. You know I've never butted into your relationships, but I don't think it's right, especially considering everything you've been through, especially in this past year, and everything you did for him when he was locked up. Everyone's talking about it where he works. You need to make a decision and fix this shit. I could feel my heart breaking, but I didn't want to show it to my father. I told him, I will handle it, Daddy. Don't worry, I'll take care of this motherfucker. As soon as I uttered those words, I felt myself turning from sad to furious. I stumped out the back door of the record store. How could Juan do this to me, I asked myself. I loved him. I was there for him when he was in jail. I had even paid for his child support during that time. I married him to save his ass from deportation. How could he do this to me after I had gone through so much pain? As much as I wanted to, I decided not to unalive him. It was what I always thought I would do if a man cheated on me. I knew that if I confronted him about it and screamed and fought and cried, it wouldn't do anything. I had to find a way to really get back at him. As soon as I drove back to Compton, I thought what I could do next. Maricela CD was playing in the car stereo, and I went over my options in my head. I decided not to say a word. Instead, I came up with a plan. First and foremost, I would make that fucker fall in love with me again. I just needed 2 months. I hired a private investigator. He videotaped various days of Juan's adventures with the putas at work. I found out which motels they would go to and learned that he would throw away the lunches I prepare him at 4 a.m. and go out to eat with the hoes instead. Que pendeja soy, I said to myself. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 33. As much as I was hurting that time, I enjoyed knowing that I was steps ahead of my husband and that soon he'd be in for a big surprise. For those 2 months, I dressed in skimpy outfits he liked. I put on makeup and I did my hair every day. I gave him foot massages and we got home and every night. By September, I had transferred the registrations of both vehicles to my name and paid up all our credit card debt. Then I was prepared to let him have it. It was going to go down my way. It was going to end the way I wanted it to end. After we started being intimate again, I felt angry and sad when we were in bed. But this was the first sign that he was falling back in love with me. The changes I was making physically, combined with the extra attention I was giving him, were all working. We made a trip, just the two of us, to Laughlin, Nevada, and I had a beautiful time. He had no clue of the shit was about to hit the fan and splatter all over his face. At 5:30 in the morning on August 1st, 1998, I handed Juan his lunch just as I did every morning. Baby, I love you, he told me. I'm sorry if I was mean and not affectionate towards you in the past. I don't know what was wrong with me. I love you so much and I never want to lose you. When I come home from work today, I want you to be ready to go out. We'll go have dinner and then dancing. We'll have a good time, okay? That's exactly what I was waiting to hear. That sounds great, baby. I love you with all my heart, too. I'll be ready. Tenderly, I kissed my husband goodbye, knowing it was the last time I would do so. As he jumped into my Lexus ES300, oh yes, he always had to drive the Lexus I had bought with my real estate earnings, and he left me with the Ford Explorer. I decided this would be the last time he showed off his car to his girlfriends at work. My heart was devastated, but my mind was strong and firm. I put on the Nike sports suit he liked and to see me wear and headed out the door without my wedding band. The ring was supposed to symbolize our love and unity and faithfulness to each other. So much for that. My friend Cynthia was waiting outside in her truck, and Juan would be furious to know that she was the one of my accomplices, since he hated her guts with a passion. She drove while I rode shotgun with our friend Nacho in the backseat. The drive to Torrance was horrible. I couldn't wait to see the look in his face, but I was scared of how I was going to feel when he was no longer home with me. The fear didn't stop me. When we got to the parking garage entrance, I told security guards that I was there to see my brother and I would be out shortly. I had Cynthia park as close to the building door as possible. Since Fairchild Fasteners was technically on federal property, I would be trespassing, and I needed to be able to enter and exit quickly. I pushed the door open, making loud noise, which got the attention as I wanted from his fellow employees. As I stomped through the warehouse, I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Some showed surprise, some showed confusion, some stared in disbelief, and many were excited. Obviously, everyone knew what had been going on behind my back and knew exactly why I was there. I asked one of his employees where Juan was, and he pointed at an office door, and I heard another coworker scream at me, "You're not supposed to be here." "No, dumb menso. Tell me something I don't know," I said as I headed towards the door and pushed it open. Juan was sitting there with another employee, and when he saw me, he looked as though he had been hit over the head with an iron pole. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 34. "Where's Maria's husband?" I asked. His face turned different colors, first pale, then red, then blue, then pale again. I thought he was going to faint. His eyes wide open began to water. I could see his Adam's apple move as he swallowed hard. "What, Maria?" "The slut you've been messing around. The one with no butt? I noticed it in the video of the private investigator that took the two of you a few months ago." He remained silent. "If not Maria, where's the other skank?" You know Lily, the married one? I don't know what you're talking about. The hell you don't. You, this idiot sitting with you, and all the rest of the people in this joint know what's been going on. You all just didn't know that I knew. You all thought it was funny and cute, huh? Let me tell you what's funny and cute. What's cute is there was no reason for you to come home. What's funny is that all your shit's gonna be burning in the front yard. There'll be nothing but ashes for you to pick up. Oh, and by the way, you're going to need a ride back after. I turned around and headed back towards the doorway. Cynthia was waiting for me in the getaway car, while Nacho had already taken off in the Lexus. I had made an extra copy of the key during the 2-month waiting period. The drive back to Compton was quiet. I couldn't believe I had gone through with it. I loved Juan so much, but I wasn't about to let my guard down. The pain of knowing that he had slept with someone else was too much for me to handle. The job wasn't finished yet. I had just seen Waiting to Exhale, and I loved the scene when Angela Bassett lit all of her men's clothes on fire and then smoked a cigarette as she watched them burn. You know what happened next. I called my family and told them to come over and look through Juan's closet and pick out anything they wanted to take. Chiquis and I gathered the rest of his clothes and threw them in 2 trash cans. I went for his underwear, t-shirts, his favorite Air Jordan sports outfits, his shoes, his church dress suits. Juan knew how to dress, and he had a lot of nice expensive clothes, and I didn't care. I went crazy showering his belongings with lighter fluid. I enjoyed feeling of vengeance and accomplishment when I threw the match in each garbage can. Then I lit a cigarette, though I didn't smoke, and I watched the flames as I did my best Angela Bassett impression. Juan, who just got a ride from a coworker, arrived just in time to save a few $100s from burning in the pocket of one of his jackets as the plastic was melting in the trash cans. I admitted it was an evil thing to do, and I regret having it done while my children were watching. I can't imagine what it must have felt like for them to see their mother hurting, but also to know that they would not now be missing their stepfather in their lives, less than a year after their biological father had become a fugitive from the law. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 35. The days after separating were devastating. Juan moved back to his mother's in Huntington Park, and I stayed at home in Compton before moving to my parents' home in North Long Beach temporarily. I was not doing well financially since I couldn't bring myself to concentrate at work. All I could think about was my on and off feelings for Juan. It didn't help that he would call me almost daily to try to convince me to give our relationship another try. Like all men caught red-handed, at first he was defensive. He told me I was evil and that he couldn't believe that I had gone as far as to hire a private investigator to follow him around. He also couldn't believe that I had kept quiet for so many months knowing that he had cheated and focused on making him fall in love with me again. After I threw him out of the house and burned his clothes that August, I didn't see him again until November. We barely even spoke. He would insist that he wanted me back and that I was the only person he wanted to be with. He was remorseful of what he had done, but I still didn't want him back. Soon after that incident, Juan became depressed and kept on saying that he would do anything to show how sorry he was to let our love down. Sometimes he would call and meet with me on demand, knowing that he would finally be able to put the whole dramatic nightmare behind us. He constantly begged me to forgive him and move forward with our relationship in the interest of our daughter and my 3 older kids. Although I sincerely wanted my children to experience stability at home and have a father figure, I didn't know if I could handle living with him, knowing that he had been unfaithful. It was extremely painful to think about, and I knew it would be difficult for me to trust him again. Every time I spoke to Juan, he'd ask, "Are we getting back together? Are we going to work this out?" My answer was always no. The holidays came, and it was hard to be alone with the kids without a partner. My baby girl, Jenica, was so little, and I started to feel guilty. Maybe I should give him another chance. I always wanted to make my relationships work, and if people sincerely apologized for their mistakes, I eventually forgave. Friends and family have often told me this was my greatest strength, but also my greatest weakness. In February 1999, Juan and I got back together. He moved back into the house on Valentine's Day of that year. I told myself we could get through this, we could get through anything. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 37. Despite Juan's infidelity, I must say that he was always a firm believer of my talent. He knew that I would someday be someone important in the musical genre in the Latin community. Because I loved him and because he was so supportive, I put the cheating behind us and moved on with him by my side. I wanted people in the industry to know that he was my husband. He served as my business manager and did all my bookings. He also shielded me from some of the dirty aspects in the industry. I learned a lot of valuable lessons when I worked at the record label with my dad, and one of them was that sleeping your way to the top is not a myth. It happens, but it wasn't going to happen that way for me. I wanted it to be known that I was a married woman who was successfully based on her talent. I never hid that I was married, and I would respect my husband to the fullest among the people and the artists in the industry. Just when Las Malandrinas was starting to get a lot of airplay in La Ley 97.9 and La Que Buena 105.5, I became pregnant with my 5th child and my 2nd child with Juan. I was quite selfish at the time and I was devastated. My music was finally being heard throughout California, Arizona, Washington, Oregon, Colorado, Illinois, and other states. Everyone told me that having a baby would ruin my career and all that I had fought for in the past 5 years. I'm not ready to have this child now, I told Juan. I agree. I want to have it terminated. Fine. And that was the extent of our conversation. And then I made my appointment. And then the strangest thing happened. When I went to the clinic to have the procedure, I took a test to confirm that I was pregnant. Then the doctor came in to do the procedure, but the baby was nowhere to be found. The doctor said that the baby was not in my uterus and he was in my fallopian tubes, which is dangerous and possibly fatal. They took me to the hospital to monitor me, and I had to lie in the hospital bed and wait to see if the baby would come back to my uterus and see if they could do the procedure. I had to stay in bed because anything that would burst inside, it could unalive me. I was there for a few days and the baby still was nowhere to be found. I told the doctor and nurses that I had to get out of there because I had performances in Indio that weekend. They tried to convince me not to go, and I wouldn't hear a word of it. They told me that if I was living at my own risk, I had to sign papers to release myself so they wouldn't be held responsible. They instructed me to go to the nearest emergency room if I had anything happen. I performed Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and on Monday I came back to LA and went to the hospital to get checked again. And there the baby was, right where he was supposed to be. It was the weirdest phenomenon. I had never been one about having a procedure, but this time I had, and now that I look at what had happened, I started to feel guilty about my decision not to have him. My baby wanted to live, and I changed my mind right there and then. My little fighter would be born after all. I continued to perform in the pregnancy, and the fans became excited for me. The baby brought la torta, the good omen. The pregnancy turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to me, and I love all my children, but this little boy brought so much joy into my life. Johnny Angel Lopez was born February 11, 2001. The following day, on February 12, La Buena started playing La Querida Socia. Many other stations followed its example, and in weeks I had a second hit on the radio. The original singer of the song, Diana Reyes, was getting major airplay on the stations in Mexico. Her label was rumored to be bringing her to a promotional tour with her version of Querida Socia, and their plan was to take territory that had been conquered by my version. For that reason, Fonovisa contacted me and told me to get ready for my first promo tour with the label. I doubt that they care. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 51. Aside from the testimony, there were medical records which could simply not be denied. Yet Trino and his family still denied it. In the elevators and hallways, Trino's family would say, "You're all fucking liars and whores." I wanted to beat them down, but we were in the courthouse and I knew I could get arrested and not be allowed to attend the trial with my daughters and sister. I refused to let my temper get the best of me. That didn't mean I wasn't threatening. When Trino's family was with us in the elevators, I told him, "What the fuck are you looking at? Turn around, face the wall." When they called me a whore, I shot back, "Well, at least I'm not ugly." On the morning of August 5th, 2006, I was preparing for my concert at the Gibson, the same place where I had seen so many of my idols perform. The same stage where Vicente Fernandez brought me up to sing in 2001 and told the audience I had the talent to make it. As I was getting ready, my managers called me and told me that we were sold out, and I was the first female banda artist to sell out the Gibson. I started to cry. When I took the stage on that unforgettable summer night, the tears continued. I was crying tears of joy of all my blessings, tears of pain of all my heartache, and tears of gratitude for the thousands of fans who sang along with me and cheering for me and shouting out that they loved me every chance they got. Amid the nightmare I was living, it was a dream come true. In October of 2006, Trino posted the $1 million bill. I have no idea how he came up with the money, but we thought for sure he was going to flee. Instead, he showed up at the next court date in a suit and tie. Now that he was no longer in prison in jumpsuit, Trino appeared confident and cocky. As he walked out of the courtroom during recess, he looked at my brother Lupillo and smiled. My son Michael, who looked up at all his uncles as father figures, lunged at Trino, the man he did not consider a father at all. Michael punched Trino in the face, and in seconds an all-out street fight broke out in the courtroom. At least 40 Riveras and Marines were punching, pulling hair, and banging heads. Every cop in the courthouse ran to break it up, and though they had the right to arrest us all, they let us off with a warning. By the grace of God, my brother Juan was late that day and arrived 20 minutes after the fight. If he had been there, I know that he would have gone crazy and beat the shit out of half of Trino's family. Most likely he had been taken to jail. When he did arrive, the courthouse official said that he couldn't sit in the courthouse that day. We can't have a man your size in here after what happened today, they explained. After the fight, security was tripled. The families had to be escorted in separately. We didn't ride the elevators or enter or exit the courthouse together any longer. The trial finally concluded on May of 2007. Trino's attorney, Richard Poland, stood in front of the jury and told them that I had influenced Rosie and Chiquis to make up such lies because it would boost my career. He said that back in 1997, when we first filed the complaint against Trino, I was just starting out in the music business, and he suggested that I hope to jumpstart my career with a criminal case against my ex-husband. Jenni Rivera was selling cassettes on Atlantic Avenue when this whole thing started, he said. Now she's a successful recording artist. I wanted to punch him, but I sat there trying to remain calm and remind myself that he had to make the shit up since he had nothing else to go on. What can be worse than being a molester? He asked the jury. Maybe being accused of a molester. The district attorney representing my family drew his closing arguments from the facts instead of making shit up out of thin air. This is such a textbook example of what an SM case is all about. He took advantage of the repeated access that he had to Rosie and Chiquis because he was a family member, and he preyed on their inexperience and embarrassment. They were easy targets because they were so young and so threatened, and it took years for them to summon the courage to speak out. Trinidad Marin is a predator, the district attorney assured the jurors, and highly deserving of the highest stigma of SM. After the jurors left to begin deliberation, a heated verbal fight broke out between my family and Trino's. With so many security guards and cops around, it never came to blows, but if it had, I can assure you it would have been a bloodshed of broken bones that day. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 52. On May 9, 2007, we sat in court awaiting the decision. My family was nervous and what would we do if he got off? I knew that God wouldn't let it happen. We couldn't possibly let this monster walk free. The foreman stepped into the microphone and we held each other's hands as one by one we heard the counts read off. On the count of continual SA on a minor, we find the defendant guilty. His family began to cry and my family took a deep breath, waiting to hear more. On the count of lewd acts with a child under 14, we find the defendant guilty. More tears and more deep breaths. On the counts of aggravated assault on a minor under 14, we find the defendant guilty. We held each other's hands and sat in silence as the foreman continued. The jury found Trino guilty of all 8 of the 9 counts against him. We watched the officers handcuff him, and we watched as his family cried. My heart broke for them. It was not their fault that they were his victims as well. My family sat there breathing in a huge heavy sigh of relief and awaiting for what would come next. The judge said, "We are going to escort the Riveras out first," and we walked out in silence, still in shock, and we walked to the elevator, and nobody was speaking. The elevator's doors closed, and we all looked at each other. It was the only moment in the history of the Rivera family that nobody could speak. For 9 years, we had dreamed of that day. For 9 years, we had been chasing Trino down. 9 years, and justice finally prevailed. There was nothing to say. Then Rosie started to scream. I joined her, and soon we were all screaming and crying. The sounds of relief and disbelief echoed in the elevator walls. Then the doors opened as we had to face the cameras outside. They snapped a photo of Rosie and me. When it was published, it brought me to tears to my eyes. She looked so happy and free for the first time in a long time. We had to wait 6 weeks for the sentencing hearing. During that time, we didn't talk about the case with Trino. We were nervous, and it was all in the hands of the judge and the jury, and we decided to trust in God and His divine judgment. On June 20th, we went back to court for Trino's sentencing. Both Rosie and Chiquis were given the opportunity to speak to Trino. Rosie spoke first, and she did not directly address Trino because she was afraid she would break down. She spoke to the entire courtroom. I lost my innocence when I was 8 years old. From that moment forward, I lost my trust in men, in myself, and in the world. I cannot say what a proper sentence would be in this case. I don't know what a person's childhood is worth, she continued. I could no longer look at my niece in the eyes because of the horrible guilt I felt. If I had spoken out about the abuse when it happened, this may have never happened to Chiquis. This is not your fault, the judge told her. This is his crime, not yours. You're not responsible for anything that happened. Rosie nodded thank you and told the judge before sitting back down. When Chiquis spoke, she looked right at her father. We didn't have to be here, she told him. If you would have just said you were sorry, we wouldn't need a court case. I just wanted to tell everyone that I'm not a liar. Trino refused to look at her. Chiquis continued, anyways, I want you to know that I love you. And all this time, I want you to tell me that you love me too. I thought he was going to look at her then. I thought he would at least have a shred of humanity in his heart to acknowledge his daughter's bravery and love. Instead, he turned his head from her, rolled his eyes, and I almost lost my shit, but I held myself back. I knew that I had to let the law deliver his punishment. Michael also spoke, and he was only 5 when Trino became a fugitive of the law. Nearly 10 years later, he finally had the chance to speak to his father. The real reason I'm standing here is to say goodbye, he told Trino. I never got to say that before, and that is all. Trino was given a minimum of 31 years to life without the possibility of parole. He was led out in the courthouse in handcuffs, and his family sobbed tears of grief, while my family shed tears of justice and relief. I always say that Trino's conviction May 9 was my Mother's Day gift, and his sentence on June 20th was my Father's Day gift. A few weeks after Trino was incarcerated, my brother Juan was contacted by some people underground. They offered to have Trino taken care of in prison. It would only cost 15,000. All I had to do was say the word and he would be taken care of. I couldn't do it. I couldn't have that in my conscience. I couldn't do that to my kids either. I was holding out hope that my three oldest children would one day have a relationship with their father. I assured them that whenever they wanted to see their father, I would drive them there. Trino said that he wanted to see Jackie and Michael, but he refused to see Chiquis. He was still calling her a liar. Once a piece of shit, always a piece of shit. We decided that we wouldn't let him continue to hurt Chiquis, so until he agrees to see all of them, he will see none of them. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 53. Fernando and I had about 1,000 bullshit breakups. We couldn't live with each other, but we couldn't live without each other. In one big breakup in the summer of 2006, we stopped talking for almost 6 months. I couldn't deal with the constant fights and instability anymore. In addition to the awful situation with Trino, I was still going through a trial with Juan to settle the divorce, and not to mention working nonstop and raising 5 kids as a single mother. I loved Fernando passionately, but it could only take so much. I would cry at bed at night, thinking I had lost my one true love I had ever known. I never cried for Trino and Juan that way, but I had never had that feeling in the pit of my stomach and the ache in my heart with them or anyone else. Fernando and I didn't speak for 6 months, but during the trial, I was so overwhelmed, I needed my best friend and soulmate to lean on. I couldn't take it anymore, so I called him. We got back together, and once again, I soon realized he was no longer the man I had known before. He started acting crazy. He accused me of sleeping around, then he would tell me that my brothers and I were trying to unalive him. Something had happened to him during the 6 months in which I hadn't seen him. I thought he had schizophrenia or some kind of chemical imbalance. People around me said he was behaving as though he was on drugs. I started to research my symptoms and realized that they were right. The paranoia, the rapid weight loss, the mood swings, the hyperactivity, and I confronted him about it, and instead of denying it, he admitted to everything. But he also told me that he was going to stop and that he could do it on his own. I knew better. I called his mother and told her what was going on. It was not an easy phone call to make. We had grown close and I cared for her so much, and I didn't want to worry her, but I didn't want to hide the truth from her. She obviously knew something was wrong with her son, but she had no clue what the drug was. I revealed everything I knew about the drugs and the effects of it. What do I do? She asked. We have to get him to rehab. It's the only way to help him get right. I kept trying to talk to him about the different centers, but he didn't want to hear it. He insisted that he would get better on his own. He would disappear for a week or two and then come back. He said he was clean, that he'd gotten a job, but then a day later I could tell he was back on it. I cannot be in this relationship, I thought, but I could also not leave him. When I didn't know what else to do, I contacted 2 of his friends, Carnalillo, a DJ from Que Buena, and George, the guy who was at the club when Fernando and I first met. We were going to lure him into a trap to take him to the center, but he figured it out before we were able to put the plan into action. One day, his mom begged him to go, and finally he gave in to her. She drove him to the facility in South Central LA and checked him in about 7 p.m. Then he met the staff and other patients. Soon it was time for bed. They put him in a room with 8 other guys. One guy was pacing back and forth and one into the other. Fernando sat in the bed and watched him for a few hours, then stood up and decided he couldn't take it. This was not for him. He got out of his bed and put his shoes on, and the guy who was pacing back and forth tried to get him to stay. "You can do it, man," the guy told Fernando. "Don't give up. I know you can do it." Fernando walked past him and right out of the facility and headed to what he thought was direction home. He walked all of South Central in 2 in the morning with 75 cents in his pocket. He called me from a payphone, but I did not hear my phone ringing. He somehow made it to a friend's house miles away from the facility. That friend brought him back to his mother's house. "I'm sorry, I couldn't stay at that place," he explained to us. "It was worse than county jail. I can kick this myself, I promise." It was a promise that he could never keep. The drugs had already taken a hold of him, and he sank further and further into a black hole. His weight had dropped to 90 pounds, and he was sleeping wherever he could find a couch. For a while, he was sleeping in a park bench in Hollywood. He was doing anything he could get his hands on some money to buy more drugs. He would call me at 5 in the morning, wide awake, and tell me about the people who were after him. I felt helpless. Nothing is worse than watching someone you love destroy himself, but you can do nothing to stop him. I was running out of ideas, and I couldn't take the madness anymore. I read up on how to deal with someone on drugs and how to help them better. All the experts advise that you have to let the addict spiral and hit rock bottom. You cannot keep letting them back into your house and life. As cruel as it may seem, it's the most loving action that you can take towards an addict, to stop them and stop contact from them, and I had to walk away from my soulmate and my best friend when he was in his weakest moment. I hoped that Fernando might clean himself up if he knew that he was going to lose me for good, but I knew that there was no reasoning with someone who was that far gone. All sense of logic had left him, and this was not the man I had known. His light was beginning to fade, and the only thing I could do was pray for the Lord to help him find it again. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 54. The next few months were so brutal, and I was constantly worrying about Fernando. I called his mother almost every day for an update. Sometimes she would know where he was, but other times she had no clue. He could have been anywhere. One day in April of 2007, I was in Mexico for a concert, and I called her from my hotel room. The second she picked up the phone, I knew something was wrong. Fernando had jumped off the roof of a 4-story building because he thought somebody was chasing him. He shattered his leg 12 places, and he was in the hospital. As soon as I got off the phone with his mother, I called him at the hospital and was able to get through his phone. "I'm coming back," I told him. "No, please. Do your concert and then come back. I'll still be here," he joked. I performed that night and flew back to LA and went straight to him. He was a mess, so thin and beat up and a shadow of the man I had known. But I could still see the spark light in his eyes. I knew my Fernando was in there somewhere, and I vowed to stay by his side until he found himself. He stayed on the couch in his mother's house, and many nights I slept on the floor right next to him. I was seeing another guy at the time, and he was so pissed at me. The guy and I broke up over it, and I could have cared less. My brother, Pastor Pete, and his wife Ramona came over and prayed for Fernando. Slowly, we started seeing him come back. Because he was immobile, he couldn't go anywhere to get a fix. Out of all the things he tried, the only remedy was his jumping off a 4-story building. We didn't officially get back together after that. We always stayed in touch, though, and we always meet up for lunch and dinner. We'd meet up and talk, or not talk at all. Despite everything we'd been through, I felt happy because I had my best friend back. I had gotten back the love and passion I had been missing for so long. But I was not going to be a fool either. I was going to see if he was going to stay straight. I waited for him to get a steady job in a place of his own, and I wanted the assurance that he was going to be okay. I could not go through that scenario all over again, and I could not put my kids through it either. I knew that I would never love another man the way I love Fernando, but I also knew that to truly love him, I had to love myself first, and to truly be there for him, I had to stand back and let him find his own way. In October of 2007, my ex-husband Juan was arrested and sentenced to 10 years in prison. My 2 youngest children, Janica and Johnny, were devastated, and so was I. In the same year, both the fathers of my children were put behind bars, and the man I loved was facing down demons of drug addiction. My father and brothers told me, "You're so good at everything else, but you're so shitty at picking man." I did not argue their point. Throughout my heartbreak with Fernando, I cried so much. Why would God have me meet the love of my life, then not have me be able to be with him? I asked Rosie. To try to cheer me up, she would say, "There's a man for you out there. Tell me what he's like." So we started to make him up. My husband wakes up at 5 in the morning and goes jogging. He takes care of himself and he eats healthy. "And what do you call him?" Rosie asked. "I call him Runner Boy." Whenever I got down about Fernando, Rosie would say, "Tell me more about Runner Boy." Runner Boy is an older man, and he's already successful. He doesn't need my money, he can buy me my engagement ring, and he's already retired. That way he has all the time for me. What does he look like? He's tall and handsome, and he knows how to dress, and he always smells good. Is he Caucasian? No. I can deal with pink bolas. I want a sexy, romantic Mexican. We were always dreaming about Runner Boy. When a man would approach me, Rosie and I would turn to each other and say, "Oh, that's not Runner Boy." Or we would text it to each other from across the room. "Cute, but that's not Runner Boy." Or she would whisper in my ear as she passed, "You should F him, but that's not Runner Boy." I should explain that Rosie stopped swearing and fucking around years before. To be exact, the date was on Sunday, November 6, 2005. Rosie called me after church that day, and her voice was light and full of joy. "Sister," she said to me, "something happened to me in church today, and I feel the only peace and love. I feel freed. God loves me, and I love him, and I'm going to live a different life." "That's great, sister. I'm so happy. And I'm not going to drink or smoke." "But sister, that's all good. And I'm not going to have sex anymore." I stayed quiet for a moment, trying to figure out how to respond nicely and truthfully to her. "Sister, I love and support you, but you mean to tell me that you're going to be celibate? I mean, abstinent?" but the concept was so alien to me that I didn't even know the right word. After that, I would ask her all the time, how is abstinence going? In 2008, Rosie was dating a guy and one day called me panicked. I'm in trouble. I slipped up. Well, was it worth it? Yeah, but it's still a sin. I'm afraid that the whole church is going to find out. And I'm the pastor's sister. How many people go to your church? I asked. About 400. Okay, so you'll be embarrassed in front of 400 people. Let me make you feel better. I'm embarrassed in front of about 4 million. What do you mean? I was giving this guy a BJ and he recorded it, and the video has been stolen. It's only a matter of time before it's going to show up in the internet. I was devastated. My brothers were going to see this, my father, my children. Could anything be more mortifying? That weekend I had a big concert and I asked Rosie and my mom to come with me. I needed their support. That Friday night, Rosie and I were laying in my bed and I was still so pissed. I couldn't believe this little punk. He was one of my band members and at the time he recorded the video. We were dating and I couldn't believe that he would do this to me. He copied the video and then he got passed around the line. Everybody in the banda world already knew about it, and in time, the rest of the Latin music world would know as well. What do? I asked Rosie. Just tell the truth. This is what couples do. I decided that I would call my brothers and my dad and tell them about the video before they heard from anyone else. Juan was ready to mess up the guy, of course. Lupe was the first one to make me laugh about it. Don't be ashamed, he said. It's good for a woman to give BJs. We need more women like that. I'm sure you did a good job. When I finished calling all of them, I turned to Rosie and said, people are going to ask you about this and I want you to see it so you know what you're commenting on. I held the phone to her face. No, she screamed. I don't want to see that. Watch it, I insisted, holding the phone to her face. I wasn't backing down until she watched it. I waited as she stared at the phone for 4 minutes. When the video ended, I said, aren't I good at it? I should be a teacher. If I fail as a singer, I'll just be an adult star. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 55. On June of that same year in 2008, I was arrested for assaulting a fan. I was on stage in my concert in Raleigh, North Carolina, when a man threw a full beer can on stage, nearly hitting me in the head, but it passed by me and hit one of my band members. Who threw that? I said. 3 rows of fans pointed to one man. Get up here, I told him. The man walked up to the stage and I popped him in the head with a microphone. If it had been a normal microphone, he would have just left a bump. But this was a diamond-encrusted mic that my brother Juan had given me as a gift. It split the man's head open at the eyebrow and he started to bleed. Security took him off stage and I didn't think much of it. You throw a beer can at me, you deserve what you get. The Raleigh police did not agree. As soon as I finished the concert, they were waiting for me in handcuffs. They arrested me and they held me on a $50,000 bail. My brother Juan came and get me and posted the necessary $5,000. I got a lot of shit from the media from the incident. They said that I treated my fans horribly and I was a horrible person. I did feel bad about it, I will admit that. But if the situation played out again, I'd probably do the same thing. I found out that the man's wife was a big fan of mine and that he had gotten drunk that night. He claimed he didn't throw the beer can and that he only raised his hand because he thought that he'd be able to dance with me, which I guess you can say he did, in a way. Again, people said I orchestrated the whole situation for the sake of media attention. Again, untrue. But I could see why people thought it was a publicity stunt. At the time, one of my hit singles was Culpable o Inocente. Since I got a pretty great mugshot out of my trip downtown, I decided to make a t-shirt with a copy of my mugshot and the words Culpable o Inocente above the photo. Fernando called me when he saw the mugshot t-shirts. Though we were no longer dating, we never lost touch. Babe, he told me, you're so ghetto. Shit. Thought I wasn't? The man I popped into the microphone filed a lawsuit against me a few weeks after the concert in North Carolina. I guess that's a sure sign that you've made it. Nobody pressed charges against me when I was a nobody, but now that I had money in the bank, I had to pay for my stupid mistakes. I settled with him out of court and I flew his entire family to sit front row on my upcoming concert on August 16, 2008 at the Nokia Theater. My goal when I started out was to make it to the Gibson Amphitheater where I had seen many of my idols perform. Of course, after I achieved that in 2006 and 2007, I came up with another goal. I wanted to make it at the Staples Center, which holds 20,000 fans. The Nokia, which holds 7,100, didn't exist when I was starting out. It had opened less than a year earlier in October of 2007, and I considered it another stepping stone on my way to Staples. The concert was sold out that night, and for those 3 hours on stage, I worked out all my problems from the past year. Juan going to prison, the trial with Trino, the drama with Fernando, my parents' ongoing divorce battle, the media backlash from my arrest, and the impending tape bombshell. The tape still hadn't become public, but I knew it was only a matter of time. For those 3 hours on stage, I was able to air out my private issues in such a public way, but only those who were closest to me knew all the details. A little over 3 weeks later, on September 9, 2008, I released my 10th studio album, Jenni. It was the first album I produced myself. I wanted to have control, but I also wanted to establish myself more than just a recording artist. I know I'm not going to be singing forever, so it was important for me that the industry and future artists knew that I could also produce. Jenni was my first album to hit #1 on Billboard's US Top Latin Album charts. Then in the first days of October, while I was enjoying the success of my album, my fears came true. The tape was posted on the internet by an anonymous source, and it spread like wildfire. Within hours, I felt as the entire world had seen it. Media attention was huge and immediate. Telemundo and Univision talked about it constantly. Many people thought myself had leaked the tape for publicity, which could be further from the truth. That was the last kind of publicity I wanted. I was mortified and pissed beyond belief, and I was going to be intentionally leak a tape. I would at least make sure the lighting was better. I was getting phone calls and emails asking if I was really me in the tape and whether I wanted to talk about it. I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to crawl into a cave and disappear, but I couldn't. That same month, I found out I was nominated for a Latin Grammy for Best Ranchero Album for La Diva en Vivo. My fellow nominees were Vicente Fernandez, Pepe Aguilar, Pedro Fernandez, and Los Temerarios. I was so proud to have my name listed besides theirs. The producers of the Latin Grammys asked me to perform on the show on November 13 with my brother Lupe. It was the first time we sang together on such a prestigious event. I was so proud to stand beside my brother on that stage with our whole family in the audience. I didn't win a Grammy that year as expected. When you're nominated in the same category as Vicente Fernandez, you pretty much know what's going to happen. Fortunately, despite the Grammy nomination and the hit album, people were still more interested in the fucking tape. I decided to turn the embarrassment into something positive. I wrote Dama Divina, which is an anthem for women to be proud of their bodies, even if they don't look like a model or an actress. The guy in the video was 20 years younger than me. He was not a runner boy, not even close. When I crossed paths with him months later, I pounced on him and I beat him up. I bit him and I busted his lip and I gave him a black eye before someone pulled me off of him. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 56. On December 7, 2008, I was scheduled to go back to Mazatlan, Mexico to perform at Palenque. I was nervous because this is the city where the tape was filmed and it was still over the news over there. I was nervous that the fans wouldn't accept me and I would be judged for it. I decided I would address the issue as soon as I got on stage to get it out of the way. I was afraid to come to Mazatlan, I told the crowd. Not because of what's been happening, but one of the hardest parts of my life began here. That video cost me so many tears. The crowd started to cheer my name over and over. At that moment, the embarrassment melted away, and I felt so loved and so relieved. Halfway through the concert, my manager Gabo told me, Esteban Loaiza's here, and he wants to meet you. In Mazatlan and many parts of Mexico, Esteban Loaiza is an idol because he represented the country through baseball. He was a pitcher for more than 20 years in the big leagues, playing for several teams, including the Chicago White Sox and the LA Dodgers. At the time, he was playing in Mexico. I invited him to come up to the stage, and when he did, fans started chanting, Beso, Beso. For the sake of putting on a good show, and because he was handsome, I played along. Can you believe it, mijo? These people want you to make me a baby, I told him. He said with a smile, let's go. As he was walking off the stage, I grabbed his butt. After the concert, he came backstage to talk to me. By this point in my career, a lot of men were afraid to approach me, but Esteban was fearless. I also knew that he could get any girl that he wanted in Mexico, and I wasn't about to kiss his feet. If he was interested, I was going to make him work a little. He said, let me take you out to eat. I'm not hungry, I told him. A drink? I'm not thirsty. Well, let me show you the town then. I've seen the town. Well, do you breathe? What about a walk for some air? I liked that he wasn't giving up, so I agreed. It was only the third after party I had attended in my entire career. We went for the walk on the beach, and then we went back to his house where his buddies were all drinking. I had hurt my knee, so I took a painkiller and fell asleep in his room as he and his friends partied downstairs. I never even kissed the guy. The next night, I caught my flight back home, and we kept in touch. We spoke every night until 2 or 3 in the morning. He never mentioned the tape. He never mentioned the incident with the fan and when I got arrested and other media speculation about me. But I wasn't sure if he had heard of it, so I wanted to get it out in the open. So one day over the phone, I decided to bring it up. You know what they say about me, right? I asked him. Yes, but that's not who I see. I see a hard-working woman who fights for her kids. The first time he came to pick me up at my house for a date, my children were skeptical of him. They were skeptical of any man who tried to date me. But he took me to dinner, and as we sat down at the restaurant, I got a text from my youngest son, Johnny, saying, "Did you know that Esteban has a criminal record?" "What are you talking about?" I texted back. Johnny wrote, "I Googled him, and it says that he was arrested for a DUI in 2006. Are you sure you want to date this guy?" I knew that this was Johnny's way of telling me, "I'm looking out for you, Mom. I've got your back." I showed Esteban the text. "Yes, it's true," he said. He explained that he had had a few drinks after the game and he stopped on the freeway for speeding. He said the experience changed him and he realized how stupid it was. We talked more about our careers and our backgrounds, and we both came from humble beginnings and we were close to our families. It was your typical first date, getting to know you conversation. When I got home, Chiquis and Jackie were waiting up to hear how it went. "So," Chiquis asked, "tell me everything." "He was nice," I replied. "It was nice." "But you're not that into him," she asked. I didn't say that. Jackie, who's not one to hide her true feelings, said, "You know, Mom, he seems kind of like a cock." While it's true, I didn't fall head over heels for him right away. He was sweet, handsome, and easy to be around. Soon enough, that combination won me over. I realized that everything about this love was different from the love I had with Fernando. It's true, it wasn't the same passion and fire, but there was no raging fights, no phone calls at 4 in the morning, no dramas. I told my family. Fernie was a passionate love. But this is a mature love, and a mature love is what I needed at this point in my life. Esteban and I understood each other in a lot of ways, and he had his own fame and understood the good, the bad, and the constant demands that came with it. I still was in touch with Fernando here and there, and I would get updates on him through his mother. Though I still care for him, I knew that he'd never be able to provide me with the stability that Esteban could. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 57. My family grew to love and appreciate Esteban for the way he treated me. He took care of me in every need, and he was always asking me, "Are you hungry? Do you need anything? What can I do for you?" He was the man that I always had dreamed of. He was the runner boy. He had his own money, he had a successful career, and he took care of himself. And he treated me like the queen and my kids like the princess and princesses. In January of 2009, the news of our relationship went public. That same month, I bought a home in Encino, California. I was tired of driving from Corona to LA all the time, and I needed to be closer to where the action was, but I couldn't bring myself to sell my home in Corona. It wasn't smart financially, but I held on to it and continued to pay the bills, though nobody was living in it. That was my first dream home. For me, it represented so much. It represented that I was making good on promises to my children and that I was proving Trino wrong, and that poor little Mexican girl from Long Beach who once lived in the back of the garage could rise up and buy a 7,000 square foot home. This new home was even bigger and almost 10,000 square feet, with views of Los Angeles and the valley as far as the eye could see. I remember walking through that house the first night and asking myself, how can it be that I once couldn't pay the water bill on my little 2-bedroom in Compton, and now I own my own home with 11 bathrooms? Not only that, I had finally found a man who treated me right and wasn't jealous or possessive, who had his own money and didn't need anything from me but love and loyalty. And that's all I needed back from him. Though we had only been together a few months, I had never felt so secure in my personal life. And then, May of that same year, Esteban and I broke up. I caught him in a white lie, and it ended right there and then. For a few months, we had been together. He had done this multiple times, and it pissed me off. He would lie about the stupidest shit. I would always call him out on it, but he continued to do it. I had enough of being lied to by men, and I wasn't going to go through it again. That same month, my brother Juan was in the final rounds of a singing contest show in Mexico called El Gran Desafío de Estrellas. He asked me to sing a song with him on one of the shows, and of course I said yes. I could never say no to Juan. The show taped every Sunday in Mexico City. That weekend, I had shows in the cities of Hermosillo and Obregón and in Jalisco. After my last performance on Saturday night, I flew to Mexico City to sing with my brother the following day. The show was broadcast on Azteca, the second biggest network in Mexico. The biggest network, Televisa, sent me an email saying that if I went on El Gran Desafío de Estrellas, they would ban me from the network. When I told Juan, he said, "Don't worry about it. It's not worth it." I said, "You're my brother and I don't give a fuck." Less than 15 minutes after we sang, I received an email saying that I was officially banned from Televisa. The next morning, I went to Mexico City Airport to fly back to LA. I had a cash on me from the concert on Saturday night, a little over $50,000. When they searched my bag, they found it and they asked me why I didn't declare it. "I'm sorry, I didn't know I had to," I explained. "Let me do it now." "You can't," they told me, before they arrested me and detained me. I had to pay $8,000 fine and then they released me. By the time I made it to LA, the news was everywhere. The first network to cover it, of course, was Televisa, despite their having said that they would never report any news on me ever again. By this point in my career, I understood how the media played a game, and I wasn't going to be part of it as long as I could help it. Around the same time, Graciela Beltran, during an appearance of El Gordo y la Flaca, said how I was always jealous of her because she was the pretty one. Most artists knew that when someone said something like that about me, I wasn't going to back down. Then they'd be able to say, "There goes Jenni Rivera, fighting off again." By this time, it was different. When Graciela started talking shit about me, it clicked. They were using me to get publicity and ratings, so I refused to respond. 6 months later, Graciela said something again, and I was so tired of the bitch, but I refused to give her publicity by fighting with her in the media. Instead, I wrote a song called Los Ovarios. I talked shit about her in the song lyrics instead of any show. Yeah, maybe you may be the queen, I sang, but it's an abandoned town. It took me many years to figure out what the rappers had taught me back in my high school days. The best way to settle your shit is through a song. That way you win the feud and you get the royalties. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 58. On July 1st, 2009, my sister and I were going to celebrate our birthdays together as we did every year. Except this time, it would be in a 3-story yacht in Long Beach. We had planned for a DJ and Los Heraderos de Nuevo León to play that night. A few hundred people were invited. The press wanted to cover the event, and everything had been set since the beginning of June. We were all looking forward to it, but I put the plans all on hold when I was informed that my ex-husband Juan had fallen ill in his cell in California City Correctional Center, where he was serving his second year of his 10-year sentence. He was transferred to Lancaster Antelope Valley Hospital, and I had expected him to get better. But as the days went on, it didn't seem as if it was going to happen. He had pneumonia and was suffering from complications due to an infection. I opted to cancel the big party and have a small dinner instead. My sister and I invited a few friends to my home in Encino for a quiet birthday celebration. I was too worried about Juan's condition to even think about celebrating my birthday. Juan was the father of my 2 youngest children, and they were both so close to him. I couldn't stand the thought of Johnny and Jenica losing their father at 7 and 11 years old. And although Juan and I battled from 2003 to 2007 over our divorce, we had long since put that behind us and became good friends once again. When he was incarcerated in 2007, I made a point to take my children to see him often, and sometimes I would even go alone. Juan and I could always talk through our shit with each other, and as we grew close once more, I consider him one of my best friends. On the morning of July 1st, I got the phone call telling me that things had taken a turn for the worse. I went to visit Juan, and as I walked into his room, I saw his sister Erica sitting there with a pale face. I immediately knew something was terribly wrong. I turned to see Juan lying in the bed with his hands cuffed to the metal bars. His eyes were open halfway, his body was shaking left and right. It seemed as the medical instrument that had been going through his mouth, down his throat, and into his lungs was pumping oxygen so heavily that it made his entire body shudder. His arms and legs moved from side to side, and his chest pumped up and down. The look in his half-open eyes told me so much. Yes, he was in a coma, but for some reason, his eyes had opened due to the swelling in his face. It was a terrible sight. "What's wrong with him?" I suddenly screamed. "What happened?" "I don't know," his sister said. "The nurses aren't telling me anything." "What do you mean they're not telling you anything? Where the fuck are they?" The nurses stormed in as they heard me screaming out of control. "I had to be quiet or I was going to be asked to leave," she said. She walked me out of the room and into the hallway where I had left Johnny and Jenica. "What's wrong, Mommy?" they asked. "What happened to Daddy?" I hadn't been this upset on any of the other days that we had visited, but I just couldn't hold it in this time. How the fuck was I going to tell my babies that their father might not make it? They were so close to him, and even after he went to jail, I would bring them to him, and they maintained a beautiful bond. I put my face against the hallway window, not wanting my kids to see me cry. I grabbed my BlackBerry from my purse, and I dialed Chiqui's number. "Mama, what's wrong?" she asked me, and as she heard me crying, "Why are you crying like this? How's Dad?" I told her he was very sick and that I knew he didn't want me to leave. I told her how he looked, and I asked her to come pick up the kids at the hospital. I also asked her to cancel the dinner party and let her guests know that I was going to spend the rest of the day at the hospital with Juan. That night at midnight, my hairstylist Ivan and his boyfriend Rafa came to visit me as I sat with Juan in the hospital. Elena, my jeweler, and her girlfriend Zulena showed up as well. Though I had broken up with Esteban 2 months earlier, he drove all the way from San Diego to be there. They brought cake and mole and sang happy birthday to me. The next day, on my actual birthday, it was just my 7-year-old son Johnny and me sitting next to Juan in room 233 in the intensive care unit at the Lancaster Antelope Valley Hospital. He wanted to be with his dad. "Thank you for spending your birthday here with my daddy," Johnny said to me. "You're a good mommy." Johnny cried so much that day. He held his father's hand and prayed, "Please, God, save my daddy. Let him live. I promise to be a good boy. I won't say bad words anymore. I'll do my homework. I'll share my PlayStation with my sister. I'll pray every night and I'll do my chores. Please, God, let my daddy live." It broke my heart into millions of pieces, and I felt so powerless. I had been through so much with Juan. Now this? Could it be that I was going to have to take our kids to their father's funeral? No, I couldn't live through that. At 11 p.m., I was still getting birthday texts and phone calls. Johnny was asleep in the chair in the corner, and earlier that day, a nurse told me that Juan only had 40% chance of living. As I watched Johnny sleep, I tried to come into terms with having to step in and be his father as well as his mother. Neither of my sons would grow up with his father, and I had to fill that role. It scared the shit out of me. To comfort Juan, I sang his favorite songs, and at the sound of my voice, tears rolled down his face. In this way, I said my last goodbyes to the father of my children, my ex-husband, and my great friend. On July 14, 2009, Juan died in his hospital bed in Lancaster, California. He was all alone. The hospital was mobbed by the press, and I was not allowed to see him. Neither was Johnny, Jenica, his sisters, his parents, or his girlfriend. I knew that this was my fault. He had been married and had kids with a celebrity, and for that, he had to pay the unfair price of being alone on his last day on earth. Before Juan passed, I asked him what he wanted his funeral to be like. He told me he wanted his favorite singer, Coyote, to be there, so I made sure it happened. In my mind, it was the only way I could make it up to Juan, because I felt such guilt that he crossed over without anyone by his side. My whole family attended his funeral as though he were still my husband and he were still their brother. Juan had been a handsome man, but by the time he passed, after so many days spent in the hospital, he was so swollen. He looked many pounds heavier. "This is not Juan," I told Chiquis. As we knelt in front of the open casket, he wouldn't be happy with the way he looks. "When I die, I want a closed casket. Promise me, princess, make sure it's a closed casket if something ever happens to me." Juan's passing changed me in so many ways. It gave me the perspective on what was important, and by this point in my career, I was selling out every concert, and all my albums were going gold and platinum. I was dominating the regional music industry, and I achieved all I had dreamed of and even more. Yet all I wanted was to be home with my kids. I decided I was not going to miss another birthday, another Mother's Day, Father's Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas, or New Year's Day. It didn't matter how lucrative the opportunity was or how prestigious. I was going to be with my family. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 59. Shortly after Juan died, I got back together with Esteban. I was willing to forgive him for lying to me, but I told him that there could be no more secrets between us, no matter how small. He agreed to the deal and treated me even better than before. He took care of my every need and showered me with gifts. Once he came home with 3 Louis Vuitton purses for no reason. My closet started to overflow with designer shoes and high-end clothes. He'd love to buy it for me. "Babe," I told him, "thank you, but I don't need all this." He didn't listen. He wasn't just generous with me. He was the same way with my kids and my family. Whatever anyone wanted, Esteban would provide. Every day, he walked in the door with more and more bags. Though I begged him not to get me anything else, it did feel good to have a man who could spoil me so horribly. I mean, I wasn't going to say no to another Louis Vuitton bag, but really, who needs 14 fucking pairs of sneakers? On July 29, my family and I had an interview with Piolín in the radio station La Nueva. Some family members were in the studio with me, and some were on the phone. Piolín was asking my mom and dad, "So when is your daughter getting married to Esteban?" "Whenever he wants," Dad responded. "So you'd be okay if he married this guy?" "If she wants," my mother said. Then Esteban called in to say hello, and Piolín asked him straight out, "When are you going to propose?" We asked her parents, and they said it was okay. Esteban said, "Really? You'd approve if I asked?" "If you love her, go for it," both my parents said. My dad added, "But you shouldn't sleep with a man before you are married." A little too late on that advice, don't you think? About a month before Juan's death, Jackie who was then 19, came to me and told me that she was pregnant. The first words out of my mouth were to tell her that she didn't have to move out. I had promised myself that if one of my daughters ever told me she was pregnant, I would not make the same mistakes that my parents and so many of parents of their generation made. "He can move into my house if he wants," I said, "but you should stay here with that baby." On November 17, 2009, Jackie went into labor. I coached her through every step of the way, telling her, "You don't need an epidural. You can do this shit on your own." And she did. A few hours later, I met my first grandchild, Jayla Hope, and I knew right then and then that my life would never be the same. Nothing made me prouder than being a mother, and nothing made me softer than being a grandmother. Jayla changed my world in so many ways. One of the biggest was that she strengthened my relationship with Jackie. Jackie is my rebel child, the one who cannot be tamed or to be told no, just like her mama. Because of this, we clashed a lot during the teenage years, but when Jayla came along, Jackie and I grew so close. She's still my rebel child and will always be. I hope that Jayla turns out to be just like both of us, so Jackie can know how wonderful and frustrating it is to have a daughter who cannot be told no. A few months after the interview with Piolín, someone in my family heard that Esteban was shopping around for a ring. When one Rivera hears something, every Rivera hears it. Rosie approached him and asked him straight out, "You're going to ask my sister to marry you, aren't you?" "Maybe," he told her. "Are you asking her because you love her or because you feel the pressure from the media?" "Don't do it because of that. I'm asking her because I love her." On January 21st, 2010, Esteban took me and my 5 kids out for sushi. Halfway through dinner, he pretended that something fell on the floor, and he went to pick it up. When he got back, he had the ring in his hand. "I love you," he told me. "I love your kids and your family, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" I was in shock. I didn't speak at first. "Answer him, Mom!" my kids yelled. Once I said yes, he put this incredible 10-carat ring on my finger. He said, "I brought the kids because I know I'm not just marrying you. I'm marrying them too." I called my sister, my brothers, my mom, my dad, and to give them the news, though I'm sure they all saw it coming before I did. I was so happy and so excited. I had never been proposed to before, and I certainly had never received a ring like that before. A month later, when we were planning our wedding, I called Rosie and asked her to be my maid of honor. "Really?" she said. "You want me? With all your famous friends, you pick me?" "Well, yeah, who else the fuck am I going to pick?" Around that same time, Esteban's mom told me, "You're taking a good man." It felt as if she were punching me right in the gut and telling me that I was not good enough for her son. "Yes," I said, "he is a good guy, and I'm a good woman." The conversation bothered me for a few days, but then I forgot about it until one day, as we got closer to the wedding, Esteban asked me for a prenup. I was completely thrown off. I've never once asked him how much he made or how much he had in the bank. I never asked to look at his finances. I didn't care. I had my own money. That's when I remember my conversation with his mother, and I understood the prenup was her idea. She thought I wanted him for his money. So I went back to Manly Freed, the same attorney who had helped me settle my divorce with Juan and helped my mother in her divorce for my dad. I told Manly I needed a prenup. Manly and Esteban's attorney worked on that prenup until the day before the wedding. Something about a prenup pissed me right the fuck off, and it made me nostalgic in the relationship I had with Fernando. Sure, we fought, but we had a passion and fire, and we trusted our love. Didn't need each other to sign any fucking legal document to prove it. I called Fernando up and demanded, "Are you ever going to get your shit together?" Because if you don't, I'm going to marry this guy. So marry him. I'm serious. I'll do it. Go ahead. Do it. What the fuck do I care? Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 60. Esteban and I were married on September 8, 2010 at Hummingbird Nest Ranch in Semi Valley. Everything about the wedding was gorgeous and perfect, and decadent. I flew in aboard a helicopter wearing custom-made Eduardo Lucero dress. We had 800 guests and a ton of security so that nobody had to worry about getting his or her picture taken. Every detail was thought out and taken care of. During her maid of honor speech, Rosie said, "You've met your runner boy, sister. He really exists." I cried throughout the whole ceremony and reception. Part of me was crying with happiness because I was finally getting the fairy tale wedding I always wanted, and part of me was crying with sadness because I was worried that I was making a mistake. That's not to say that our marriage wasn't beautiful. It was for some time. He traveled with me everywhere. He took care of me and my kids. He calmly entered into my world of craziness, which had grown a bit more crazy that year, since I had just agreed to do my reality show, I Love Jenni, with the Mundos Network. When I got into watching a lot of reality shows around 2007, I said to myself, fuck, my life's better than any novela. I should have one of those. I wanted the world to see what really went on in my life. The media misconstructed things and flat out made them up or exaggerated the facts. I wanted people to see that I was the girl from the hood who had made good. I knew it would be entertaining, but I also wanted to inspire. I tried to sell it to a few big networks, but none of them wanted it. Fuck them, I said. We'll do it on our own. And I made a pilot episode and Mundos, Telemundo's English language sister network, wanted to take it. But by then I had become so busy with all the other projects that I didn't think I even had time for it. I suggested that they do a show based on Chiquis and I would be the executive producer and appear on it when I could. I knew Chiquis had the personality for it. She's funny, smart, sassy, and she's surrounded by a bunch of crazy-ass characters, one of them being her mama. We came up with the idea for a show called Jenni Rivera Presents Chiquis and Rat Q. Rat Q was one of her friends, but she quit in the middle, and then Chiquis carried the show. After the first season, I realized that it would be a great opportunity for all the kids and I if we also did a show focused on me. I decided I would make the time for it. But that's when I came up with I Love Jenni. After the success of Chiqui's show, every single network that had rejected my pitch now wanted to do a show with me, but I wouldn't consider leaving Mundos. I had always said that I would stick with the people who believed in me first. I saw I Love Jenni as a way to make money for my kids and show them how to work. And make no mistake, filming a reality show is hard work. A lot of days it's a huge pain in the ass, and at times I wanted to hide from the cameras, but it was not an option. The production team shows up at your front step morning, ready to work, and we all have to show up, no matter how shitty the day was going. On December 2010, we went through one of those shitty days. When my son Michael was accused of SA. He was 19 and he had slept with a minor. When they broke up, the girl told her mother that she had slept with Mikey. I sat down with Mikey and I asked her what had happened. I couldn't believe that he would mistreat a female. He had grown up surrounded by women and I never once saw him be anything but kind to tender. Mikey told me that he had slept with this girl, but it had been consensual. It was decided to defend the allegations in court. Before the case began, Rosie presented me with the victory ring that I had given her during the trial with Trino. "This for you," she said. "Justice will be done again." The case came to a close in March of 2011 when Mikey was given 3 years of probation and a $600 fine. And just when the saga with Mikey ended, a one began with my longtime manager, Gabo. I had a concert in Mexico where we were paid in cash. One of Gabo's assistants borrowed a leather bag from the head security guard so he wouldn't be carrying around the funds in his hands. When the assistant returned the bag to the security guard at the end of the night, the original contract was in the bag. I looked at the contract and didn't recognize any of the numbers. The tickets sold were more than I had been told. The amount that I was paid was double what Gabo had told me and now that I was getting paid. For years, my family and friends had been telling me that Gabo was not trustworthy, and now here it was, in black and white on a legal document. It appeared as if he was taking half my proceedings from the concert in addition to his management fee. We looked into the contracts and it seemed that every appearance where I was making $200,000, I would only receive $100,000. We estimated the total amount owed to me and it was between $1 million to $2.5 million. Gabo knew more than anyone else how hard I worked. He knew how tiring and demanding it was to constantly be on the go, yet I always showed up and gave it 100%. He knew how painful it was for me to be away from my kids, and he also knew that everything I did it for them. I worked so hard to provide them with everything I never had. In my mind, Gabo did not hurt me. He did something far worse. The son of a bitch hurt my children. The following week, Gabo and I were in Acapulco chilling by the pool eating lunch. At a quiet, calm moment, I presented the issue. I know what you did, I told Gabo. There have been discrepancies on the payments and you owe me money. He denied it and made me even angrier. Here's the thing. If I catch people doing something and they admit to it, I can forgive them right away. If they deny it, game on. Gabo and I had been together for over 10 years. After all that time, you'd think he'd known who he was fucking with. I left him in Acapulco and did not care how he made his way home. I cried for Gabo as if it were a breakup. It wasn't about the money. People had lied to me before, but they were never people I consider family. And that's how I felt about Gabo. He was a brother who had betrayed me for so long when I was so loyal to him in return. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 61. On September 3rd, 2011, I made it to the Staples Center, the end goal of my LA music scene. The place where I said that once I got there, I would retire. I was the first female regional Mexican artist to ever perform there. The funny thing was, I had worked so hard to get on that stage and dream of how great it would be, and then it really wasn't. It was too big. It didn't have the intimacy of the Gibson or the Kodak. I felt the same when I played at Auditorio Nacional of Mexico City. Though I could make a lot more money playing at the venues such as the Staples Center or the Auditorio Nacional, I preferred to play at the smaller theaters and palenques. The following year, I did 2 back-to-back gigs at the Gibson instead of the large concert at the Staples. In October of 2011, I launched a radio show called Contacto Directo con Jenni Rivera. I was tired of being the media pawn and hearing all the lies and rumors about me. I saw the show as an opportunity for me to make statements or announcements directly to my fans, but also have conversations with them, to talk about real issues with them and offer them help and advice from my experiences. I asked Rosie to be on it with me, but she was skeptical at first because she thought she was boring and would have nothing to talk about, but eventually I talked her into it. All we had to do was be ourselves. The way we talked to each other was how we talked on the radio. We did it live from the studio and for 4 hours every Wednesday. The executives told me not to talk about 2 things, politics and religion, so I talked freely about both. These topics affected my people, and I wasn't going to be influenced or scared. I kept it real for my fans, and they thanked me by turning in every week. We started in 13 markets. Within a few months, we were at 40 markets, and by the end of the year, 57. I was convinced, now more than ever, that I wanted to have my own talk show. Though I told myself that I would slow down in 2012, I was busier than ever. Not only did I have concerts every weekend, I had a reality show, the radio show, a boutique that I was planning, and a taco truck that I was launching. I was also taking acting lessons, and I was a judge for La Voz Mexico. Esteban came with me wherever I went. While part of me liked having a companion by my side, I appreciated that he took care of me. I also felt suffocated at times. I would tell him I needed my space, and he would get bored and go shopping for me. He would come home with his car full of bags, and everyone in the family would go out and help him cart the bags inside. I realized that maybe he had a problem, but if he made him happy and kept him out of my hair, the fuck did I care what he did with his money? By the time that summer came around, I had 1,000 things going on at once, but the forefront of my mind was that Mikey's girlfriend, Drea, was about to have a baby, my second grandchild. On August 26, 2012, I flew down to Mexico for a few days to tape La Voz. I told Drea, don't have this baby until I get back, but the baby had other plans. As I was sitting on my judge chair on August 28, I kept checking my phone for news. During the break, a text came through of a photo of my second gorgeous granddaughter, Luna Amira. I was upset that I was not there to welcome her into the world, but I was so excited that I got to meet another princess that I could spoil and teach her the Big Booty song. In 2011, I got a call from the Hispanic godfather of Hollywood, Edward James Olmos. I need a big favor from you, he said. I need you to work with me on a film, and I'll send you the script, and you can tell me if you like it. He explained that he wanted me to play the role of Maria, a drug-addicted mother who was in prison. The movie is called Philip Brown, and it tells the story of a Latina rapper who struggles to make it in the game. I didn't read the script to say yes. The fact that Erwood Dream almost saw something in me and I didn't see in myself was enough for a reason for me to sign on. As everything I do, I wasn't going to half-ass it. I was going to do the best in my ability. I trained with an acting coach and I rehearsed with my co-stars for an entire month leading up to filming. I was surrounded by such amazing, generous talent. I loved being on set. There was a special atmosphere and camaraderie among actors and crew who, by the way, were being paid so little for this tiny independent film. I was getting $1,000. During breaks on set, we talked to the crew and cameramen. There was one photographer who I talked to for a while, and I found out that he was not being paid at all. He needed the money way more than I did, so I asked the production to give my check to him. I wasn't in it for the money. I said from the beginning I would do it for free. I was true to my word. I wasn't in it for the glamour. My character was stripped down, no makeup, and drugged half the time. I was in it because Edward James almost had asked me, because I loved the story and because I wanted to prove to myself I could. And most of all, I wanted my kids to be proud of me. I wanted them to be able to look back at the big screen and once they say, "That's my mama. Isn't she fucking cool?" I never considered acting before, but I seriously considered singing when I started out, and look where that got me. A few months after the movie was finished, the acting world came calling once more. In September 2012, my manager set up meetings with huge entertainment executives at Fox, CBS, NBC, and ABC. They were interested in doing a sitcom loosely based on my life starring me. I couldn't believe that any of these execs even wanted to meet with me. I didn't want to get ahead of myself, but I thought that this might be my way out of performing and traveling so much. I would finally be able to stay at home with the kids on weekends. I felt that something was shifting in my life for the better. Not only did I have the meeting set up with the TV execs, but there were also talks of getting a residency, a regular gig for a certain amount of time under contract in Vegas. I figured that I could do a sitcom, the residency, and then maybe travel once or twice a month on concerts in Mexico. It would allow me more times to be home with my kids, which is all I ever wanted. Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, Part 63. Jackie got married on September 19, 2012, one of the happiest days of my life. I got to walk her down the aisle, and I remember feeling truly at peace. I had my 5 incredible children around me and my 2 beautiful granddaughters and a supported man beside me. I thought I couldn't ask for anything more. On September 21st, that all went to shit. Stevan told a lie about someone he had called, and when I confronted him about it, he denied it. 2 days later, I brought it up again. "Just tell me the truth," I told him. "I already know it. Just admit it." But he still denied it. I was so pissed, and I told him to get out of the house for a few days so I could cool off. He packed a bag and headed to his mother's house in San Diego. I told him I would call him when I was ready to talk. As I watched him walk away, I felt something in my gut. Something was not right. The following day, I discovered evidence to even more lies and deception. I was done. I had warned him so many times that I could not stand liars and that I would not be putting up with lying, and I do not back up on my word. Stevan kept calling and texting to come back home, and I needed more time, I told him. Give me a few more days. On October 1st, I found myself sitting in Manly Fried's office once again. Rosie came with me. "You're making me a lot of money, young lady. I can live just off you," he told me. "The next time you think about dating someone, bring him to me. Not your mom, not your dad, me. I can see you're amazing at everything you do except choosing men." Then he asked Rosie, "Isn't she bad at choosing men? Tell her the truth." Rosie turned to me and said, "We're bad at choosing men." Manly said, "I wasn't asking about you. Tell her she's bad at it." Of course, Rosie didn't have it in her to be harsh. I got sad when we started to divide whatever was protected. The good news is that a lot of it was protected thanks to the amazing prenup. "Manly," I said, "would I get in trouble if I took all his clothes and burned them in the backyard? What if I get one of those big trash bins and put them in there and then burn them?" "No, don't do it. His attorney will make you compensate him for every piece of clothing." "Ah, fuck," I said. "Well, it was a beautiful wedding, wasn't it?" "It was a beautiful wedding," Rosie assured me. "A beautiful mistake. I should have never married a man I didn't love passionately. One day, I'll put that dress up in a museum with a plaque that says, 'Worn once, by mistake.'" This would be my 3rd divorce, and I wanted to deliver the papers myself, but obviously I knew that a third party had to do it. I made a plan with Pete Salgado, my business manager, for him to deliver the papers, but not before I had a chance to say my last piece to Esteban. I told Esteban that I would meet him at his mother's house in San Diego because I had her wedding album for her. It had finally been delivered, and I wanted to give it to his mom myself. When I got to her house, Esteban wasn't there yet. I sat with his mother, going through the pictures and talking about the beautiful day it had been. Soon, Esteban walked in and I greeted him by saying, "Hey, is there anything you want to tell me?" "No, why?" I told him that I knew everything he had done. I told his family the whole truth, including the details that are too horrible to admit in writing. His family got upset, calling me all sorts of names and telling me that I was a liar. I had said all I needed to say, and I stood up and walked out of the front door as they continued to hurl insults at my back. As I walked out, Pete walked in and delivered the papers to Esteban. As I drove away from Esteban and back to my home to my children, my own lyrics played back to me. I realized that I hadn't just written those songs for other women. I wrote them for me too. I started writing songs because I wanted the world to know that it was good to be a woman and it was okay not to have a perfect little life. It was okay to be beautiful in your own way and to be strong, to get an education and pursue your own career. I wasn't shameful to be a single mother. There is a pride in getting up every morning, pulling your kids through, and living for them. I wanted to make all that acceptable. I wanted women everywhere to be able to say, "Hey, I can do this." "I can do this," I repeated myself, but inside I was still crumbling. Something about this divorce was different from the others. Maybe it was because I thought I was older and wiser and wouldn't let this kind of shit happen to me anymore. Or maybe it was because Esteban had pretended to be one man and was another entirely. Over the next few weeks, I found out he had betrayed my trust in so many ways. I just wanted my mother. I drove through her neighborhood and circled her house, but I could not find the courage to go inside. I was afraid of her seeing me in so much pain. I called Rosie to tell her where I was. Rosie was living with my mom, and I thought that if there were any two people that I wanted to be with at that moment, it was them. But I also was afraid of showing them my weak side. I had always been the strong one, and now I felt so helpless. "Come in," Rosie said. "I don't want you to see me like this. Don't lose respect for me. I think this is what's going to break me." "Never. Nothing will break you. Come in here, please. I don't want Mom to see me cry. I'm afraid if I fall for her arms, I will never stop crying. Don't be scared for Mom. She's strong. She can handle it." As I turned the corner once more, I headed to my mother's driveway. I saw one of her friends pull up, and I drove past the house back to the freeway. The following day, I got a call from Pete Salgado telling me not that one, but all four networks wanted my sitcom. 10 years earlier, when I was driving around, dropping off my demo tapes and having doors slammed in my face, I said that one day people were going to believe in the little Mexican girl from LBC. As I climbed the ladder of my career step by step, I saw that came true, but I never imagined that 4 Main Street networks would offer me the chance to be the first Mexican woman to star in her own sitcom. This was it. This was my exit route. As I told my family I was still in shock, I said with tears in my eyes, "They love me. They really love me." Unbreakable by Jenni Rivera, the final part. 3 days later, I had one of the most beautiful and joyful days in my life on October 6th when I threw Janica her quinceañera. I got to give her the quinceañera I never had, with 300 people at the beautiful hall in Montebello. Janica is the one child who has never made me cry. She's this incredible, bright, sweet, beautiful person, and you can't help but feel joy when you're around her. That's how I felt the whole day as we were surrounded by so much love. In the midst of one of the saddest periods in my life, I was reminded that God always provides the light. On Wednesday, October 3rd, I announced the news about my sitcom and my divorce on the radio show. I was not going to give the media the control or benefit of telling my story. I was going to tell it my way. I chose to keep the details of my divorce private. I said only the television news reports about the cause of the split are not true. I admitted that I wish I had never married him and that he had done something terrible to me and I wouldn't stand for it. But I refused to go any further into details. To defend Esteban would be a lie. To tell the truth would be too horrible. I miss Esteban as a companion, but I thank God that I didn't truly love him. If I had, his betrayals would have broken me. I was sad and hurt, but because he never truly had my heart, I knew that I would be okay. My family had thought that this marriage would be forever. I said, I have an 8-year track record. Trino was 8 years, Juan was 8 years. Maybe I knew Esteban wasn't going to last forever, but I thought he would at least get the 8 years. When we were going through the divorce, I took off my diamond wedding ring, but I still wore the black diamond engagement ring. Why are you wearing that? My family would ask. Because I always knew I'd be a widow, but he's not dead. He is to me. I wanted to auction off my engagement and wedding rings to save my friend Chava's life. He was an ex-employee so dear to me. He had leukemia and needed $200,000 for a bone marrow transplant. I announced the auction on the radio show with so much joy. Then Esteban's attorney called my attorney and stated that I could not auction it. They were still negotiating details of our divorce, and the rings could end up belonging to Esteban. I cried not being able to hold the auction for Chava. I couldn't believe Esteban would do such a thing, but it only confirmed to me that he was not the man I thought he was. On December 3rd, 2012, I delivered a donation check to the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles. I was wearing my most ghetto overalls, held it together with a safety pin. As I handed over the check, I was so sad about everything that was going on in my life, and it was the moment that made me feel as if I still had a purpose. When I left the hospital, my car somehow made its way to Fernando's apartment in Hollywood. I sat out in front of my car, still in the drive, debating whether I should call him. I had not seen him since I married Esteban more than 2 years earlier. Through all of the drama, Fernando was the one man I could talk to through all my shit with. I knew that he would never judge or shame me for my mistakes. More important, he was the one man who never betrayed me. On the day I needed to remind myself that such men existed, I needed him. I put my car in park and I called him, praying that he'd pick up. As soon as I heard him say hello, I got a lump in my throat. "Where are you?" I said. "I'm home." "Why?" "Good. Come outside." He came outside and got into my passenger seat. I was crying by then. "What's the matter?" "I'm divorcing Esteban." I'm sure he already knew, either from his mom or from seeing it all over the media, but he didn't ask me what happened or why. Instead, he made me laugh, of course. We got a Subway and ate it on the roof of his building overlooking Hollywood and Highland. I told him everything that was going on down to each embarrassing detail. Though he knew I should have never married Esteban, he never said it. He just let me talk. And then he leaned in and kissed me, a sweet, tender, honest kiss. Sometimes that's all you need from a man, a good kiss, some Subway, and an ear to listen to all the shit rattling in your head. 2 days later, I went into the radio station to do a weekly show with Rosie. We had her dad on the show as a special guest. We reminisced about the good old days of growing up poor in Long Beach, the Saturdays at the swap meets, selling buttons at concerts during the 1984 Olympics. He told us again about how he had made it to America and the men at the gas station in San Diego who gave him $20, which made the rest of his life and our lives possible. Afterwards, Rosie and I went to the swap meet to visit the world we once knew so well, the world that helped us shape us into the adults we became. As we walked through those old rows of tables, we talked about the sitcom deal. How is it that these strangers see something in me that is worthy of love, but not the men closest to me? I asked Rosie. "You will find love one day," she said, "a true, enduring love." "You're forgetting, sister. I already found that love on stage. My fans give me that love." As we walked the old path that I used to run between my parents' booth, I remember the simplicity of my childhood. I remember the days when we had no money and we were barely getting by, but we had each other and that was all that mattered. And it was still all that mattered. I was looking forward to Christmas that year. I wanted everyone to be together again. Despite any arguments or differences that we may have, I wanted every Rivera to be in the same place at the same time. I needed them all. I would always need them all. In the middle of my reminiscing, I turned to Rosie and asked, "Do you want Chinese food? I bet your baby wants Chinese food." What that meant, we both knew, was that I wanted Chinese food even though I was on a diet. "Yes, I think the baby does want Chinese food," Rosie said, since she knew how to play this game so well. We ordered Chinese food and ate in my car in an empty parking lot, and we talked for hours about everything that was important, not important in life. Love, sex, babies, men, a new runner boy, God, music, childhood memories, drunken memories, and the dreams of what was still to come. On December 9, 2012, after performing at a concert in Monterrey, Mexico, Jenni Rivera passed away on a tragic plane crash along with 4 beloved members of her team. Lawyer Mario Macias, publicist Arturo Rivera, makeup artist Jacob Yavale, and hairstylist Jorge Gigi Sanchez, as well as the pilots of the plane Miguel Perez and Alejandro Torres. Jenni had been writing this autobiography for years, but always refused to let it go in print because she didn't know how it should end. The truth is, the story of Jenni Rivera was never meant to have an ending. As with all true icons, her legend will endure many lifetimes. They will forever be telling the tale of La Diva de la Banda, La Reina de Reinas, the rebel from Long Beach, La Mariposa de Barrio, the badass mother who could not be broken.